So, good afternoon, everyone. We're about to kick off the second annual UNH Sports Law Review Symposium. My name is Jacob Rocchi, and I'm your editor-in-chief. And we have a great lineup of speakers here today. We're going to be covering categories such as sports betting, cryptocurrency, just a general life of what it's like to be a sports law attorney, and many other types of fields that you can practice in the field of sports law. We're going to start off with a talk from Congresswoman Lori Trahan, and yeah, I'm going to pull it up here right now. Awesome. Just want to thank Congresswoman Lori Trahan again for her comments on NIL and its implementation in Congress, and hopefully we get some sort of bill soon. But we're going to jump to our next segment, which is what it's like to be a young sports law attorney. And I'm going to be joined here by one of my colleagues back in Pittsburgh, Derrick Maultsby Jr. And I am going to read off his bio. So, Derrick is an associate attorney at Frost Brown Todd LLP, where he is a member of the Data, Digital Assets and Privacy, Corporate and Intellectual Property practice groups. His practice includes corporate transactional and business advisory services in the tech, privacy, private equity, venture capital, startup/small business, and sports and entertainment industries. Derrick is considered to be an expert in several substantive areas of the law, and most recently has been invited to speak on various topics at the intersection of the law, technology, and sports at the University of Dayton School of Law, Minority Innovation Weekend, Founder X Global Summit, and Black Tech Week. Aside from his practice, Derrick is also committed to creating a more equitable and inclusive environment within his law firm through serving on the firm's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. In addition to serving on the Regional Advisory Board of Venture for America, Derrick also serves on several community boards, including the Duquesne Black Alumni Network Board. In 2021, Derrick was named a trailblazer in the law by American Lawyer magazine, and most recently, during the summer of 2022, he was named a lawyer on the fast track by the Legal Intelligencer. A Pittsburgh native, Derrick's college career began at Jackson State University, where he was a member of the football team. Eventually, Derrick would receive his bachelor's degree from the Indiana University of Pennsylvania and his Juris Doctorate from Duquesne University School of Law. In the fall of 2022, Derrick was selected to receive the Young Alumni Award from Indiana University of Pennsylvania, as well as accept an invitation to become a fellow in the National Bar Association's Associate Academy for Excellence. More recently, Derrick was named a 2023 Duke of the Last Decade honoree by Duquesne University. Derrick is also currently participates in the Advanced Leadership Institute's Emerging Leaders program at Carnegie Mellon, where he is the Pittsburgh Legal Diversity and Inclusion Coalition Leadership Scholar. So thank you, Derrick, for joining us here. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So I will kick it off with the first question. So I just wrote off your bio and we got a little bit of background information about you. So take us through your academic and legal career journey. What made you want to become a lawyer?
Yeah, honestly, never really thought about being a lawyer. The great hope was to play in the NFL and have a career in that. My junior year, tore my Achilles, and really struggled to kind of get back from that injury, and ultimately just decided that football was no longer for me. So moved back home to Pittsburgh and enrolled in a state school about 40 minutes up the street from my mother's house, and kind of had to figure out what was next. And you can't tell right now, but I always said that I was gifted with a 6'4", 330-pound frame that could run a 4.8 40, and so I had to figure out what else I was gifted with that could carry on for what my life was going to be after football. And it ultimately just ended up being law school. Joined the debate team at IUP, won a few tournaments, really enjoyed building an argument and things along those lines. But then I got to law school and I realized that litigation is not for me. And I ultimately fell more into the corporate side of things, and been really, really fortunate to just have a really great start to my career, and get to work with a lot of cool clients, a lot of great people like yourself. And I'm just happy to kind of continue to do what I'm doing every day.
It's an incredible journey. You kind of talked about this before in terms of your academic or your athletic challenges, but Can you talk more so about like your academic challenges, perhaps throughout undergrad, law school, and perhaps like professionally?
Yeah, no, I mean, sure. Academically challenges. I mean, the transition from undergrad to law school, I think is very difficult. Undergrad for me was I don't want to say easy, but it was relatively straightforward, right? You show up to class, you take notes, you take a test, you get an A. Law school being kind of a different beast, right? There's so much more, reading at home, doing a lot of the work at home, and class being more of for clarifying the points that you taught yourself. So I struggled with that immensely in my first semester. Second semester of law school started to pick it up, and through time got better, but not seeing just straight A's down a transcript for the first time in my life was really, really difficult. I kind of have always been somebody who, has been, I don't want to say the best, but, has always succeeded and achieved, when it came to athletics and when it came to academics. So to kind of have to try a little bit harder and even sometimes learning a lesson that your best isn't good enough. Sometimes in law school, B is it, right? And you're not going to get that A. And that's okay, right? Yeah, we all have to run our own race, and we all have to focus on our own success and our own, growth over time. And so focusing on, all the other stuff is only going to distract you from getting better each and every day. And so, I think I learned a lot of lessons during law school that I utilize in my practice now. There's always going to be some client that goes with another law firm or lawyer. There's always going to be, a negotiation where maybe you look back and you think, oh man, I could have done X, I could have done Y, I could have done, Z. But it's all about learning, it's all about growth, and it's all about running your own race and getting better every day. And just building upon the foundation that I'm sure, everybody that's listening right now already has, right? That you already built a really strong foundation to get to where you are. And you're just kind of, I think, moving that forward.
That's awesome advice. Thank you. So number 3, how did you become interested in sports and entertainment law, tech law, and corporate law?
Yeah. So once I kind of figured out that litigation wasn't for me, being more of a corporate lawyer, deal lawyer was kind of where my head was at. I find that I'm a relatively solid connector with people and with a lot of deals and negotiations and working through getting to a resolution. It's all about connecting with people and having dialogue. Whereas litigation is a whole different thing. So I went to more of the corporate side, and I sort of fell into it. What I ended up doing, right? I was a law clerk in 2017. And that was when the General Data Protection Regulation had passed. And so, there was a lot of research assignments that needed done about the GDPR, which is it's an EU privacy law. For anybody that doesn't know, I realized I didn't really say what it was. There's a lot of research projects that needed done, and I kind of took the lead on it. And before I knew it, here I was, still a law student, working during the school year for a law firm, leading client meetings, explaining what this regulation is, how it impacts their business. And that allowed me to get a really, unique, experience, really, really unique skills that I was able to build early in terms of, client engagement, client interaction, which then kind of led to me deciding what I wanted my practice to look like. And I wanted my practice to look like technology and like data privacy. And if I'm being real, sports and entertainment wasn't a part of that. But sorry, take a drink of water. But as I'm sure a lot of you know, when you're the lawyer, whether it's amongst your friends, your family, whatever, you get a lot of those, Facebook messages, and you get a lot of those calls, with people asking all these different types of questions, and usually you can't help them. But I was in a fortunate circumstance where, a lot of my friends that went on to play in the NFL, a lot of people that they were connected to that are agents and management and all those different types of things. They had needs that fell on the corporate side of things, or more so, endorsement deals, things like that. And I just luckily kind of built the foundation and the skill set to be able to work on those types of matters, and weirdly enough, fell into doing a solid amount of sports and entertainment law, and continue to build on that and get to work for some really interesting, fun clients that our firm has that are larger, and then also have some clients of my own that I manage and manage those relationships, and really, really exciting stuff to kind of still get involved in the sports world, even though I'm no longer the athlete I once was.
That's great. Now to question 4. How did you meet people in the sports and entertainment law industry? Did you go to any sort of advice for professors, classmates, LinkedIn, social media?
Yeah, I mean, that's something kind of that I think I just hinted at a little bit. I didn't really seek it out, right? It kind of found me, and the advice that I give to students who are interested in this space is that there are skills that you can get, like, because sports and entertainment work is attractive. A lot of people want to do it. It's not a fee. In my opinion, it's a connections field. You need to know the right people to kind of get those clients, or you need to go work at the right firm to be able to work on that type of work. And not everybody's going to be able to do that right out of law school. You're going to have to position yourself. And so how can you position yourself? And the way that I was positioned to answer the call when the call came was just building those fundamental skills, man. Going to a place that has a strong advertising practice, right? That works on advertising deals and influencer deals. Going to a place that has a strong corporate practice, learning how to, what licensing agreements and vendor agreements look like, and getting a lot of reps in, doing that kind of blocking and tackling. And when you get to that point and you can work on that stuff, you'll have some transferable skills that really, I think, translate well to the sports and entertainment side when you're looking at, endorsement deals, when you're looking at some of the investments that these athletes like to make. And, on the entertainment side, when you're talking about production agreements, when you're talking about, some of the vendor and technology agreements that, on the entertainment side, you'll come across, you're positioning yourself well to be able to learn and be able to work on those things. And I'm super fortunate, at my firm, we have Michael Cooper is a partner in our Houston office. And, he was the president of the Houston Roughnecks. The last iteration of the XFL, not this iteration, but the iteration before. And before that, he was the president of a G League team for the NBA. He's been doing sports and entertainment work for 20 years. So I've been very fortunate to have him. And then a partner in our Indianapolis office, AJ Coriali. He was a Sony executive at one point in his life. So, I'm very fortunate to have 2 mentors that are able to sort of take the skills that I already had and polish those things up and kind of keep me going along to work on even more complex, sports and entertainment matters. But, the advice for anybody out there that wants to do this work is, look for those firms, look for those opportunities where you can really just sharpen your tools when it comes to corporate matters, and kind of those general contracts matters, because that's going to really, I think, translate well when an opportunity does arise. And I'll speak to a little bit to a job listing that I saw not long ago that got passed to me and just wasn't the right opportunity. But the Philadelphia Eagles, they were hiring a technology innovation council, right? The Tennessee Titans right now, I believe they're hiring counsel for outside vendors and a few other things. So you look at these teams and you look at the needs that they have, and you go to the pages and you look at the kind of counsel they're hiring. They're not hiring somebody that's, specifically has some kind of football knowledge, right? Like, they are hiring folks that, have these substantive legal skills that can be leveraged, in a way that's going to benefit that ball club, that, that franchise. And your clients individually, right? You're thinking about players and things like that. It's going to be just the same thing.
That's excellent. Thank you. Now, question 5, take us through what you do for work on a daily basis. What do you enjoy? What are some challenges that you face?
Yeah, I mean, on a daily basis, that's kind of boring, right? I think the number one thing that I struggle with and I try to implement in my life is balance. And so, on a daily basis, I'm striving for balance. And what that kind of translates to is, waking up in the first hour and a half of my day is meant for me. So that's that workout, that's that, reading, whatever it may be, I need to go do that, right? And I need to invest in myself every day. From there, it becomes about the clients, right? And about my colleagues at the firm. So, it's reading those emails, it's getting into the day, it's looking at that calendar, figuring out if I'm in the office or if I'm out of the office, or am I doing site visits? That's sort of a kind of a day to day, right? And then it's just kind of executing on that plan. Every once in a while, you got travel, right? So, whether I'm in New York or in Miami or in LA or in Houston, or Philadelphia or whatever, it's making sure that I am, doing what I need to do for my clients, as well as, making sure that I'm able to also be out there and developing that business and meeting with my clients and managing those relationships. So I tell everybody, being a lawyer is a lot, in my opinion, is a lot like being in sales, right? There's a half of it that is getting out there. It's building your brand. It's creating relationships. It's selling your skills and the skills of your colleagues. And then on the other side of it, it's doing the work, right? It's the substantive legal work. And there's that nice balance that you have to have there too, or because and I'll give a hint to all the folks that want to work at law firms. You start out as an associate and the work is there for you and you got partners feeding you work, but then one day you become partner and they look at you and they say, hey, so where's your business? And you look at them and you're like, wait, what? Right? So one of the things that I always wanted to do is just make sure that I find that balance now as early as possible. And I get out there and I make those relationships and I start planting those seeds and I start bringing in that business, because, in 5 years from now, I just got promoted to senior associate. So, in the next 4 to 5 years, when I'm getting promoted to partner, it'll be one of those things where, I want to already have the resume that speaks to that partnership level.
Great. So question 6, how do you stay informed about current events related to your practice fields? Do you talk to your colleagues about these current events? Do you attend CLEs related to your practice fields?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the first part of it is what you can do, right? And, the general counsel for North America of Microsoft gave me some of the best advice I had gotten as a young law student when I was in my second year of law school. And he said, your social media is the most powerful tool that you have on you at all times. Not only are you building your brand and sort of, connecting with people, but you can also be learning from people. So, Twitter is huge, and LinkedIn are huge for me, right? I mean, you all have a sort of a wealth of knowledge there at UNH, with some of your professors, right? That are huge follows on Twitter, and so you have these opportunities to learn in real time from experts in the field on specific issues happening as they're happening. I mean, that's such a powerful tool. So don't take that for granted. You utilize your Twitter, train your algorithm to push you what you're actually looking for. The second part of that is definitely your colleagues. I see things on Twitter, or I see things on LinkedIn, or, I get notification like Google alerts and things like that. And I share that with my colleagues that it makes sense to share it with, right? And I get their opinions on it. and they do the same with me. And, you know, we share these things as a group to understand, you know, one, what does this mean? Two, how does this impact our clients? Three, how can this help us get business? You know, these are the things we're thinking about as we look at these kind of events or developments happening in real time. And then, yeah, I mean, CLEs, trying to think, you know, there's certain webinars that are out there. There's definitely, you know, conferences are big for me. There's certain things that, especially in a post-COVID world, you know, I try my best to get out there and do and continue to push myself to learn. And, you know, sometimes you don't learn anything, but you get validated. I find that a lot at conferences. You know, I'll go sit in a panel and I'll listen, and they're saying all the things that I say to my clients or that I say to my colleagues. And the only thing, you know, some people look at that as like, oh, it's a waste of time, I'm not learning anything. But you're actually learning that this is what the greater group thinks. This is what, you know, somebody put that person on the panel because they thought that they're one of the sharpest minds that they know. And so it's super important to be able to, you know, look at it that way. And you know, listen to the sharpest mind and say, wow, like the sharpest mind thinks what I think. That's pretty good. I feel validated in my belief in legal opinion. So those are some of the ways that I continue to kind of keep my tools sharpened. You know, they call it a practice, a law practice, and I think they call it that right because we're practicing every day. And we're getting better every day, and you'll never know everything. You know, I look at myself 3 years ago to now. I know, yeah, I feel like I know so much more, and I'm sure 3 years from now I'll sit here and I'll say, oh, that guy 3 years ago, he didn't know anything. I know way more, and so on and so forth.
Now, number 8, what has been your favorite part about being a lawyer thus far?
Wow. I mean, you know, there's a lot of it. Yeah. For me, it's the lifestyle. You know, I love it. I'm a competitor at heart, and in a lot of ways, I think you know, being a lawyer is a competitive sport. You know, you have an adversarial component to it, right? You sit across the table from somebody on a deal. You have your teammates, right? Your firm or your colleagues or whatever. You know, you practice, you study, you get ready for these moments. So, you know, I think the lifestyle that comes with this sort of competitive aspect of it, the teamwork aspect of it, and then also just being able to go connect with people and travel the world, and meet folks and get to interact and really know my clients. You know, the lifestyle I think that we have is we're so fortunate to have it. Because I mean, how many people, you know, get to wake up every day and work with all different types of people and, you know, work in different types of industries and with different types of clients. I mean, it's truly a special opportunity that we're given as lawyers to do that, right? I mean, so many different professions, you know, people go sit at a desk and they do the same thing every day. And while lawyering can feel that way at times, I think, you know, you flip that on the head. What do we get to do every day? And usually what we get to do is you know, different subject matters. And even if it's the same exact subject matter, the same exact, you know, type of deal, you're always tweaking it. It's a puzzle. You're always changing pieces of it. You're always adding in new facts. And I just think it's really cool. You know, how we get to just sort of attack, you know, a different set of facts every day in our careers. And, you know, I've really enjoyed the lifestyle aspect thus far, especially as I find more balance, because it is easy to just wake up. First thing you do is you're on your email, you're taking calls, you're working all day. You know, you start getting to that point where you realize your health is at risk. So, you know, I say I love the lifestyle, but I'll preach balance in that, and making sure that you're taking care of yourself, because you're only gonna be as good, you know, as what you put into yourself as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your like sports team analogy. I think that's pretty accurate from my times working this past summer. So at my firm. And lastly, what advice would you provide to aspiring lawyers, especially those that wish to pursue sports and entertainment law?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll echo again what I said earlier. If you can't find that job in sports and entertainment, once again, I mean, I truly will charge you with going and looking at how you can get a role within a firm or in a corporation or whatever it may be, where you can build those transferable skills. And anybody who's aspiring to be a sports attorney or an entertainment attorney, I also charge you to go look at the job listings for senior counsel and for associate general counsel at some of these ball clubs, at some of these franchises, at Sony Music, et cetera and so forth. They're not looking for sports attorneys. They're not looking for entertainment attorneys. They are looking, for the most part, for attorneys that do tax, for attorneys that do labor and employment, for corporate counsel, for innovation and technology counsel. They're looking to bring people in that have the subject matter expertise that fits within their greater business of entertainment, that fits within their greater business of sports. And they'll bring you in and they'll train you up on obviously the unique aspects of working for maybe an NFL franchise or a ball club or one of those places like Sony or Warner Brothers. They'll teach you some of those pieces, right? But most of the people that I know and that I work across at those places, they weren't sports lawyers, right? I have a good friend at Netflix who's a real estate attorney. There's these different ways to, I think, get to the ultimate goal of where you want to be in terms of your employer. And then once you're there, you get to learn other things, right? You get to kind of pick up more of those skills that would be transferable. But that's what I would charge everybody with, is just making sure that you're kind of making yourself aware of what the market actually looks like, right, for sports and entertainment lawyers, and what that actually means. And I mean, if you want to be somebody that's purely on the talent side, or is purely on the side of a business, like a Sony or like a Warner Brothers, or like a football franchise that's working specifically with the talent and the athletes, then that corporate background is going to be super important as you build your skills to be attractive to some of these law firms that specifically do that, or in those positions that specifically do that. Because like I said, you're not going to find that that perfect fit right out of law school every time. You might need to build some skills and get into that to where your ultimate goal is later on, and that's okay. I think if you talk to a lot of the people who are in those positions, they'll have similar stories of how they got to where they are, and it won't just be some straightforward path. And if there's anything I can leave you with, is just trusting yourself, trusting your process, get better every day. And don't get discouraged, because most people that I meet that are in these amazing roles and have these really established careers, when they tell me their story, it was not a straightforward path to get to where they are. They had a lot of turns, they had a lot of roadblocks. I know somebody who works at Sony and right out of law school, I think they were working in estates and trusts. In doing that, right? They do nothing close to that now, but that's just what they had to do to build some of those transferable skills and get to their next job. So, don't get discouraged, keep your head up. This is a long career. I'm 29 years old. I have 30, 40 more years of practice probably. And who knows where I'll be 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And, I just choose to wake up every day and to attack every day and to focus on every day how I can get better, how I can provide value to my clients, provide value to my firm. And today, luckily, I get to provide value to all of you, hopefully, with my insight.
So I just want to open it up to the audience if any of you have any questions for Derrick. Ryan, yes.
Hey, wanted to say thank you for presenting to us, and also congratulations on the recent promotion. But my question for you is, where do you see yourself going? Do you want to stick to the law firm track now that you've sort of experienced the law firm, or Do you want to transition into a sport franchise or league? I know you mentioned the Eagles and the Titans. So
Yeah. I think great question. Comes down to the right opportunity, right? Life is all about timing, right? And sort of where you are in that time when a certain opportunity comes along. And so, those kinds of jobs come with life changes, moving cities, having to maybe take another bar exam, all those different types of things. And the one thing that I'll tell you, and it's not always the truth, but generally speaking, private practice at a law firm, especially early on, you're going to be making a decent amount of money, and that doesn't always translate when you go to an in-house role. And so, the other piece that I always just keep in mind is, how am I at a point now where I can take that pay cut? Am I at a point now where I'd be comfortable doing that? And the right opportunity, probably, yeah, right. But if it's not the right opportunity, it's not the right fit, it's not the right city, things like that, and it's all about moments in time. Maybe next year I'm way more open to the idea of taking a pay cut and moving, but as of right now, I'm pretty happy with private practice and sort of where I'm at in a firm. I have the ability to work in a very broad range of matters, and I really enjoy that. And I also have the ability to learn from a lot of people. I mean, you go in-house, even a big legal department at a major corporation, it's not as big as a 800 person law firm. So you have a lot of people that have expertise in a lot of things, and being able to soak all that up and being able to learn from all those people right now is really interesting to me, and is adding a lot of value to my life and to my clients. So we'll see. I wouldn't say no to ever seeing me probably with one of the bigger entertainment kind of hubs, or an NFL franchise or an NBA franchise. But that would just have to be the right opportunity at the right time, and would have to make sense for my family and I.
So thank you for the question, Ryan. Anybody else in the audience have a question? Yeah, Professor McCann.
Derrick, thank you for joining us first off. And thinking what you've learned since law school, were there courses because there are some 2 L's here, that you might have maybe wish you took that would be useful now in your work?
Muted myself. Yeah. I think I took some of those courses that have been useful in my work. And I also will say that in just 3 or 4 or 5 years time, I mean, law schools are being so innovative and are adding coursework, thanks to folks like you, Professor McCann, that are pushing towards these other career paths. So I see some courses now, like elective courses, that focus, specifically on, sports and entertainment, or specifically on technology, that I'm always very jealous that I didn't get to take. But what I'll say is those courses that focus on, I took a venture capital course in law school, and what I'll say is some of the things that we learned in that VC course, you'd be surprised how a lot of those conversations pop up when you're talking to athletes. These are folks that overnight, when they're drafted, are turned into millionaires, and then they start to associate themselves with other millionaires. And so, they're looking, and a lot of these athletes, I'll say this, new age athletes are insanely smart and aware that football or basketball or baseball is not forever. And they are literally, like, so early on. I mean, college students these days, right, with the NIL, they're so early on looking at how can they, capitalize on their fame and on the money that they're making at this moment, because they realize they're going to need other sources of income. So the amounts of time that it comes up in conversation, hey, I'm looking to start this venture, and I'm getting this investor, and I'm thinking about this person being a partner in it, and I want to do this and I want to do that. All of a sudden you're taking your endorsement deal hat off and you're putting your, new venture hat on, right? So, those courses that I think touch on those corporate matters that are a little bit beyond just contracts. So, when you think about securities, you think about venture capital, you think about, any entertainment law class that you can get into, advertising and the FTC regulations. There's things that exist in different law schools and in different places that if you can get into those courses and get credit and just pick up a little bit of those issues and how to issue spot them, I think it'll benefit your practice later on. Because the influencers, athletes, the entertainment companies, they deal with all of these things, and being at the very least able to understand what they're saying is such a value add to be able to ask the right questions and then pull in the right people if you need to.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, thank you so much, Derrick. This was very insightful and very accomplished, and we're very happy that you joined us here today. And I'll be looking forward to seeing you back in Pittsburgh very soon. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it. And I look forward to hopefully being able to make it in person at some point in the future. This is something I can tell is going to continue on and continue building and be very successful due to the efforts of yourself, your colleagues, your professors, really kind of forging, I think, a path for sports and entertainment law at the law school level to prepare you all for what's next. So excited to keep watching what you're all doing as well.
Awesome. Let's give it up. So we're going to transition to a Q&A with Professor McCann and Charles McIntyre. So I will let those two take it away from here.
Was that my cue?
Yeah, good timing, perfect timing.
Yeah, good to see my friend.
Good to see you.
You're my people, back row. That's law school, that was me. Very much so. Very much so. I got called up by more than one professor in my life.
Let's should we stand over here? Is this the right for the camera? I want to make sure we're.
I can see you guys.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. So I will briefly introduce our state executive director of the New Hampshire Lottery, Charles McIntyre. Charles and I have known each other for a long time, and he is the person who's in charge of all of the gaming in the state, including sports betting, but also lotteries and other forms of wagering. And prior to that, he held an executive position with the Massachusetts State Lottery. And prior to that, he was a prosecutor of organized crime. So he prosecuted all sorts of bad people.
Live to tell about it. Right, live to tell about it.
Live to tell about it. So in Boston. So and he also worked with Congresswoman Trahan, who was our keynote,
Correct, yeah.
for a while.
Laura and I worked for a number of years together.
Yep. And so why don't we kick it off, and it's just a Q&A. Maybe you could, I think when people hear state lottery, sports betting, could you talk about sort of generally what your role is, other than overseeing it? How does sports betting in the state work, and maybe where does the money go?
How does sports betting work? It generally works okay, but sometimes not so much. But so it started after, obviously, the Murphy case, right? Murphy v. NCAA, which I think was long overdue, right? And it was a weird situation where the legislature came to us and said, could you guys write a law, please? And so we did. We wrote the way we wanted to do it. I don't know if it was the best way. I don't know if it's the worst way. One of the things I thought, which was pure hubris on my part, is that I thought I knew sports betting because I had prosecuted organized crime. So of course I went from being the scourge of bookies to becoming one. And so the defense bar howled, of course. So I thought I knew sports betting because back in the day, sports betting was the ATM machine of organized crime. Bookies had to pay what was called rent or gratuity or just a fee to organized crime to operate. Every month they owed, in my neighborhood, Whitey Bulger, $2,000, $3,000 a month for the privilege of doing business. And for that, you got not dead. And they would collect for you. They would literally collect for you. So if somebody owed you a debt of a big figure, they would go collect the money for you or leave the gentleman worse than they found him. So our idea was to sort of make sports betting like the street version on the phone and the computer. And there's several benefits to that. One is people who bet already know it very well. Second, it's a guaranteed revenue stream for the state. And third, consumer protection. If there's a problem with your bet, if the like, you can call me. Now, I found all kinds of interesting things, which you might find interesting. When I posted for director of sports betting, I got several resumes of people, and it was like, hey, I think this guy has a nickname like the Rabbit or Benny or 2 years or something. And so a bunch of bookies applied to be director of sports betting.
Well, they know parts of it, right?
Exactly. And so we launched 2009. Governor Sununu was very insistent upon launching quickly. From our bid contract to launch was 35 days, which is the fastest launch in US history. There's not even a close second. So we got a contract approval November 25th. We launched December 30th. I took the 31st off as well as the 1st because we didn't get Christmas. But
You and I are from Massachusetts where
Yeah.
things work really slowly when it comes to the government. How did it go so quickly? I mean, is it the New Hampshire entrepreneurial spirit? Is it Governor Sununu saying you gotta get it done?
it was very much live for your die. Sort of the State House was like, all right, I know somebody who's a bookie or places bets. They're doing it now. Why don't we do it here, bring it into the light, make some money off of it, and do it legitimately. We could trust those guys over at the lottery. We had a good relationship with the State House, and so it passed overwhelmingly. That's the reason for it. And Governor Sununu wanted it. He was a fan. He took the first bet. I think he still plays. Every so often I feel like handing him a card for, compulsive issues. I'm kidding, Governor, if you heard that, I'm very much joking. He likes to bet $82 on certain things because he's the 82nd governor. That's like his, yeah. And honestly, during the planning process, he's an engineer by training, so he's very much about the next step, the next step, the next step, the next step. He's not a typical politician. He's very much about how do we get from A to B to C to D, what's the timeline, where's the Gantt chart, et cetera. So we launched, and it's been, we're the second most profitable state in the country for sports betting, just behind New York. And we're blowing everyone else out of the water.
Think of our population versus New York, right?
Yeah, this year, I just checked the numbers this morning in preparation for coming here. We're already at, by the end of March, $727 million bet in the state. So we might crack $1 billion this year, in terms of wagering for a state of 1 million people. About 25% of that comes from Massachusetts, and we thank them for their donations. And it's funny because we obviously, if you folks know sports betting, has to be in-state, servers in-state. So we have very robust geolocation. We have a heat map. And the heat map is the hottest at the liquor stores on the border. So Portsmouth Traffic Circle liquor store blows up. So folks go in, place their bets, grab a couple bottles, save all that money, go back to Massachusetts.
It's not a bad life.
No. Best, and then we say this all the time in the State House, best kind of money is out of state money. It just is. It is. Tourists,
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. Because you're taking all the money and there's no services going that are needed.
When, after the Murphy decision, some said, well, if we legalize sports betting, it's gonna lead to all these people over betting, becoming addicted. One question is, weren't they already betting except it was illegal in some cases? And in that context, how is legalized betting better for them? And then secondly, how do you deal with problem gambling and that stuff?
So the first one I have intimate knowledge of, going back to my days of being a prosecutor. My expertise was specifically electronic surveillance, wiretaps, body wires, bugs, hidden cameras, etc. And so one of the, it's called Title III, the wiretap. 272.99 of the mass laws of wiretapping. If you can identify somebody, you have to notify them they were intercepted. You do it later after you've grabbed the case, but at the end of the day, if you've tapped somebody or you've intercepted their phone call, you have to tell them you did it. Boy, that list was long for bookies, and a bunch of it was in the State House of Massachusetts.
Wow.
And barracks and police stations and city halls, and I can't obviously disclose, there's parts of my life I can't talk about publicly. But that, it was, we were on the phones of the Super Bowl which is the one they lost. They lost one. The second one they lost. I can't remember.
That was 2012.
2012.
It was in Indianapolis.
No, but the one before that, there was in a.
The Giants, the first one, that was 2008. That was the Randy Moss year.
Yeah, that was the Randy Moss
That was the
year,
Randy
yes.
Moss year.
We were on the phones with the bookie that time, and we couldn't keep up with it. Yeah, we literally couldn't keep up with the phones.
Wow.
Had 4 troopers listening to phone calls and just writing notes, and it was constant. So there was betting going on beforehand, and I think the passage up here was recognition of that fact.
What about the offshore stuff? That was going on, wasn't it? I know that's gotten some attention, that a lot of people would use offshore accounts, and now at least they can do it in the state. It seems like a more secure environment.
One of my favorite stories is, so I get a call from the front desk, and it's like, hey, Charlie, somebody wants to talk about a theft. Okay, good phone. Hi, my name is John Smith. I forget the guy's name. Yeah, I bet $8,000 on UCLA to win the title, and they're not paying me. And I was like, let me tell you about my friend Anista Miranda, i.e. Miranda versus Arizona, because you just admitted to a crime, and he bet offshore with a place in Barbados, which was popular. And I said, sorry, sir, I can't collect your illegal bet in Barbados, because once you move outside the bounds of the law, you lose the protection of it, which he didn't, which is this case. And so that was happening frequently. These offshore places, if you won a huge bet, a prop bet that paid off, or a parlay that paid off, they would just go, who are you? Click. And so it's one of the arguments we made when we passed this law. It's one of the arguments that's been made across the U.S. This is prohibition.
So when COVID hit, you kept working, right? The state kept generating revenue. I mean, sports shut down, but not everywhere. It wasn't Russia. There was, you were able, of all places, you were able to.
Our #1 sport during COVID, the first year, was Russian table tennis. So we averaged $100,000 a day on Russian table tennis wagering. All like $10, $20 a bet. And it was like Igor versus Yevgeny. And it would be this room, a fraction the size of this room. And it would be like the worst production value ever. You saw like some guy on an iPhone videoing the tennis match, the table tennis match. And you're like, all right, this has got to be, this can't be real. But people would bet, like I said, $100 grand, over $100 grand a day on that.
How do they know anything about?
They don't. They didn't know a thing about it. It was just, they were jonesing for sports.
Yeah.
And this is all they had. It was like, if you're in the desert, you'll drink the sand, and this is what they had to sort of live on, because all the rest of sports were shut down. Like, we took action on sports like bandy. You know what bandy is?
Yeah.
Bandy is basically like soccer on a hockey rink.
Yeah,
I don't know if that is.
mainly in Russia.
Russia and New Scandinavian. Scandinavian countries do it, Norway, Sweden, Finland. And I walked down with my chief compliance officer who approves all events and wagers for the state. And I'm like, we're taking action on bandy? He's like, what's bandy? I'm like, well, we're taking bets on it, like a dime at a time, but it was like, it's hockey, like played like a soccer match. There's no substitutions really, and the rink is like 3 times the size. And it's just, anyway, now hopefully look at that now. The folks at the back room of the computers can Google it, but. So we just took all kinds of weird, like Burundian soccer and.
What about all this stuff in other countries? How are you sure it's legit? How do you know there isn't? I mean, it could happen anywhere, of course, but with some of these sort of minor sports in other countries, I mean, how do you know that people aren't throwing games and things like that?
It's the hardest part of the job, risk management. It really is, and that really encompasses a large area of our business and our day-to-day operations related to sports betting. NFL is the gold standard. The background check they go through, because one of the mass lottery employees is head linesman in the NFL. So I saw what the background check looks like for those folks, and it's insane. It's more than I ever had to go through at any level for any clearance I've ever had, including, I mean, like, it's my wife is a judge in the state. It's worse than she had to go through to become a judge. So they are fanatical. So they're the gold standard of risk management in terms of how you feel. And then there's the Russian table tennis, which is not the gold standard. And your risk, you look at the wagering activity, we belong to a number of integrity services, which all check and hear rumors and the like. And you just don't allow that much money. So a Russian table tennis bet, they'll max out at like $100. So who's gonna arrange for a, Russian game to be fixed for $100? It's just not. And there's no way of avoiding it. And if you have a chance and you're bored, there's a South American match, soccer match. I shared this with Michael. 2 second-tier teams in South American soccer.
Oh, all right.
Where it was obvious that the team, I'll tell you the setup, one of the teams found out if they won the game, they were promoted to the league. And they found out 70 minutes into the match, or 80 minutes into the match. And clearly some conversation was held because the other team stopped playing. And the joke is, it's like if you're playing FIFA and your batteries went dead in your controller. Like the teams literally just stopped playing. And they scored 2 goals and it was 1. And I was like, I run to my office the next day and run into the sports betting. Did we take action on that? Because it was clearly was fixed. And so those were the obvious ones. There was another event with the UFC fight, the fighter who I can't remember the name of. Do you want to all know how UFC fighters get paid? So there's 3 piles of money.
They should know, the ones that took my class, right?
What, the show fee, the win, and then they're gonna meet a bump if there's
That's right.
Yeah, so so this fighter had a busted leg. And if he doesn't show up for the fight, he gets paid nothing.
Yeah.
And so he struggled into the ring. His manager knew it and bet. And so that was immediately a trigger to all of the regulators around the US. And we all talk every month, check, and I'll get alerts. Sometimes it feels like every day of a potential match fixing, sport event fixing. And they're usually lower tier events. They're usually like esports or like, 3rd tier men's singles tennis from Singapore. Or, smaller events like that, nothing huge, knock on wood.
Right. Yeah.
So, close enough.
We claim this one.
Yeah. But so you watch that all the time, because the easiest sport to rig is tennis. It's tennis.
You can throw a point.
You can throw a game, and in these second tier tournaments, you're talking about a win of say 10,000.
Tennis, right, Jackson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You play.
You ever thrown it? Don't answer that.
Yeah, don't answer that. Let me advise the council.
Was bet on.
Because if you're up 5-1, and then you look to your coach and wink, he can sit on his phone, bet that you're gonna throw the next game. You throw the next game, and then win the following game, go win 6-2. Nothing's bad's happened, it's essentially like point shaving in tennis.
Yeah. You mentioned the NFL being the gold standard for referees, but with players, there have been some issues. And Professor Dube texted me before this event about how today the NFL suspended 5 players.
So
Any concerns? Like, does that ever? Do you ever think? And you were head of the National Association of State Lottery Executive Directors. Are there conversations about, well, 5 players are betting? There was a player last year that did it. Is there ever a critical mass where you start to think maybe there's something going on?
It's a good question. I saw that today, and it was more than unnerving, but not terrifying, right? The first thing you look at is results, and as you noticed, you can see patterns develop, and that certainly plays out in wagering activity. All of us subscribe to a number of services that track wagering activity and look for anomalous events. For example, there was a rather famous event in South American soccer again, where somebody bet heavy on a 4-0 loss, which, as you know, if you know soccer, 4-0 was like 1,000 points. We'll joke in our office is the World Cup, the over-under is 1, right?
Right.
So you would look for a spike in that, and then we'd all track it. And then every month we all talk about it, looking for those events specifically. And the bigger events football is one of those odd examples. it's almost impossible to fix because there's so many various points and events within a given game. It's really hard to do that. I mean, events like basketball are easier if you get to a point guard.
Yeah.
Like Arizona State, I don't know if you know the Arizona State scandal, your students. Gangsters got to 2 players in Arizona State, sadly one who had NBA potential. And word got out because these kids were driving cars they couldn't afford. And a bunch of Arizona State kids found out that the games were being fixed. And they showed up to Las Vegas in Arizona State sweatshirts. And we're like, I'd like to bet on Arizona State, I hear it's fixed. And they're bringing piles of money and, you know, not Carlo Gambino level criminals, not John Gotti level criminals. Very, as I used to say, we don't catch the smart ones. But yeah, that was discovered. Arizona State point guard was, you know, on a fix and shaving points. And so
You mentioned college, and we do talk about Boston College and point shaving. But you and I have talked about this, the NCAA's role in this. The NCAA, with name, image, likeness, has taken a very passive approach, right? They came up with an interim policy, but have not enforced it in any sort of meaningful way. What about with betting? I mean, has the NCAA, what's the NCAA doing on it that you can share?
Interesting way to phrase the question.
Well, I'm
So,
trying to
I will tell you, so
steer it in the right place.
as you can imagine, there's tiers to sports betting. So if we did, say we do $1 billion this year, the plurality of that will be on the NFL. The next biggest chunk will be on college sports, particularly the NCAA tournament where it's a significant amount of money. After we had sports betting passed in the state, the NFL hired a former commissioner of public safety to be the local regional contact for all things sports betting related in New England. Former commissioner of public safety in Massachusetts, he constantly contacts my head of sports betting about individuals and players, and you know, any names pop up, let's check the list, the ineligible list, we'll call it. The first time, Michael knows this, the first time I got contacted about the NCAA was about 3 weeks ago. Now, I've been taking bets since 2019. So I've been taking, and in college sports, I don't know the exact number, but we probably exceed $100 million in sports betting in this state in college sports. And we've taken some very large bets in sports betting for college sports, 6 figures. And so my fear in those is always, well, I'll back up, do the math for you. NFL has 60 players, give or take, per team. Another 50, say, administration coaches who know stuff that would be helpful, 110. 32 teams, you're talking 3,000 people. They have at least 24 full-time ex-law enforcement people watching it for the NFL, as well as people for their individual teams watching it. NCAA doesn't have anybody. And they're talking about hundreds of universities, thousands of kids per college that don't have the same level. Moreover, what is paying for a result and what does an NIL deal look like? I don't know. I don't know. There's no agents in the NFL get reviewed and vetted and contracts are vetted. I know the college process.
Well, especially with Congresswoman Trahan talked about collectives. Are they really, many would say, are not really paying for name, image, likeness, they're paying as an inducement to go to a college or to stay at a college. There's a transfer port. Like you said, what is this payment, right? Anything could be cloaked as NIL, when it's
Exactly.
not, right?
I mean, you've got a booster who went to the university, who owns a number of businesses in the community. God bless, he's paying jobs and all that stuff. But is he paying for the player? Is he paying for the image? I don't know the difference. All I can know is the result on the field. And that's a backward way to look at it, and there's no vetting process. Like I said, it operates much like a cartel. And so for years, the NCAA's position has been to oppose it. Whereas the NFL was clearly getting ready for this the years it was coming. They could see the handwriting on the wall. They knew about sports betting. They had people already checking their players. College was just like, the 3 monkeys, right? And now they're like, well, the conferences can handle it. I'm guessing, like I said, the first notice I got was 3 weeks ago that, hey, we're here, let's keep an open line of communication. I'm like, open line of communication, you should be way more aggressive on enforcement. Because not only for the purposes of integrity of the events, but in this state, we have a law that the part of the law says that you can't bet on UNH sports. Other states don't have that. And so you got kids in college who are getting harassed by their classmates. Hey, I lost 10 grand on you last night. What the hell? Did you hit a free throw? And so it's not a way to.
Does the NCAA say, well, colleges have to deal with, that's a college thing, just like with school stuff?
Yeah.
You know, the professors have to deal, I mean, is it just sort of to push it off on the universities?
I mean, it's a good question, only because I know some of the universities take sports betting sponsorships, which I think is inherently conflicting. But like I said, we don't up here. We met with the colleges when we were first drafting the law, and we crafted that provision that said we're not going to take money on New Hampshire sports, except if UNH made the college basketball tournament. You can bet on the tournament, just not that. But it's the biggest fear I have going forward in terms of sports betting. The NCAA relationship with the conferences, relationship with the colleges.
You mentioned Massachusetts now has legalized sports betting. You said about 25% of the business is from.
Yeah.
Do you still see people, especially in northern Mass, coming up, given that it's a tax-free state? I mean, there are all sorts of reasons that already brought us up. As somebody who grew up in northern Massachusetts, we would go up to New Hampshire because there was no sales tax. And I imagine that those things will still induce people to.
We do. We weirdly have not seen a drop off in our mobile wagering. We have seen a bit of a drop off in retail, but we expect that to change only because when sports betting launches in a given jurisdiction, they're offer heavy. You know, deposit $5, get $200 in free bets, which is why if you ever look at the handle numbers, the amount wagered in each jurisdiction, sometimes those are completely puffed up numbers because they include free bets. And sometimes, you know, a third of the betting is free, which if you run a business, you know, is not profitable. So we haven't seen that much cannibalization from Massachusetts. And as you say, we're fans of that no income tax thing. And so we've made a point of hammering that to the player base. That, hey, by the way, you pay income tax in that weird state down to the south.
It's raised it too. People make over $1 million, right? They increased it as well.
Yeah. I don't know why Mass hates lottery players and sports bettors, but they do. So there's a Mega Millions winner in Maine, a mile from the Hampshire border in January. And if he'd just driven a mile and a quarter further south, he would have saved $56 million in state income tax. So Governor Sununu tweeted it was the most expensive mile in history ever. Literally just driven 1 mile more to Rochester, New Hampshire from Lebanon, Maine, he would have saved over, like, I think it's like $56 million.
Let's open it up for questions from, yes.
Yeah, so just kind of curious on kind of New Hampshire's policy. So I know a lot of states kind of do multiple sports books. In Massachusetts, obviously does like FanDuel, DraftKings, stuff like that. But New Hampshire kind of took a different route and went with an exclusive licensing agreement with DraftKings, kind of had like a bidding process. Could you kind of just elaborate on why New Hampshire went that route and kind of the thought process behind that?
Sure. First, we like money, so there's that. And we don't like people paying taxes, so there's that too. So I'm being flippant, I'm sorry. In the legislation itself, language was inserted that was not our language. The legislature did it, which is, you know, they're allowed to do that, it's their bill. That said, the lottery had to do what it believed to be the most profitable method for the state. And so we went out to bid. We had a lot of interest from obviously top tier operators. We got some interest from like Uzbekistan, some oligarch, a couple of them actually. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, anyway.
It's interesting though that they thought they would have a, right?
Yeah, so I think there were a number of reasons, some second, third, fourth tier operators from odd places, we'll say, wanting in the US. So we went through a bid process. And so during our bid process, we said, okay, world, if you're one of 5, what do you pay us? If you're one of 3, what do you pay us? If you're one of 1, what do you pay us? And it was not us, it was the market decided. And DraftKings said, we'll give you half. I'm like, and if we went to 3 or more, the rate went down to 17%. And so we would have had to have triple the sports betting in the market to get the same revenue. And that doesn't work economically. Moreover, it's not really a responsible gambling belief. So markets that spend a fortune on marketing are spending a fortune to go for every little nook and cranny where there might be a sports bettor. And so their acquisition costs are in the thousands of dollars per person. Our state's is $22. So we're not, it's weird, and I'm gonna say this, maybe hold on a second, this is a long answer to a very good question and a simple one. Sports betting is not that big. So in any given month, we'll only have 40,000 active users on our mobile platform, or 45. It's in a population of 1 million adults, another 500,000 that drive in from someplace else or could. So it's a small market that does it. And so if you spend a fortune jamming down marketing and gross rating points on TV and radio, you're getting customers that aren't that valuable and that are transient. And so for all those reasons, that's why we did it the way we did it.
Since apparently you answered one of my questions, there is mobile betting in New Hampshire.
Yes.
Okay. What checks are in place to avoid a situation where people can bet a lot? Are there maximums or ways to sort of say, hey, enough is enough? Because mobile betting, the risk is, of course, you just have your phone
Sure.
and you can bet whatever, and we are getting increased reports of problem betting in different parts of the country. So I'd like to know what the New Hampshire regulators have done or tried to do to try to stem the potential for excessive bets.
So there are suggested limits on your phone that we use. And one of the nice things about the phone is we know who you are. We know your past history. Also, the call center operators are actually trained to look for certain buzzwords, certain phrases. So if you call into your account and say something, yeah, I gotta pay my mortgage this month, or I need to win because of X, Y, or Z, they'll actually shut off your account. And for the mobile platform, we don't find the same activity we do in retail. Big bets are actually done at retail. And the limits are dependent upon the event itself. So like we'll take I'll lump them south. And so if there's a large bettor, we'll actually go through a proof of funds check. And we'll go through a KYC process. Because we have individuals who are betting 6 figures a game, and we check on them, and our biggest wagerer, that's a word. Wagerer a word?
It sounded great.
Did I just make it up? Yeah. Has a Gulf Stream. And this is where he likes to do. This is for him fun. If you saw him, you wouldn't think anything of him, but he is worth well enough to own a Gulf Stream. And so this is his hobby. And so in terms of amount, I've never thought problem gambling based on amount, I've based on the circumstances of the person matter more. Like somebody losing $20 who's on assistance is worse than this guy losing $100,000 is my point. So, and obviously we are the main sponsor for the Hampshire Council on Problem Gambling. They use our offices. We do all their marketing for them for free. All the materials for free. Their budget's paid for out of my budget, for which I have gone back personally 3 times to have increased. So everything we can do. At the end of the day, this is New Hampshire, so we're very much a personal responsibility state, but we do everything we can.
I'm kind of wondering what the State Lottery Commission's relationship with DraftKings is like. Like a few times you said, did we take action on this? And by we, do you mean did DraftKings take action on this, and then you are the regulatory body that oversees all of those because they operate within your state? And do you have any power to say you can't offer this in our state or anything like that?
So our relationship is actually owner-vendor. This isn't a license situation, which is most states. They're our vendor, and they're under contract, and the contract governs our relationship.
They work for you.
They work for us, yeah, and certainly that contract is up, oh God, I should know this. I think 3 years from now, 4 years from now. And so we have the authority to say no to everything. And obviously we don't, but if they bring us things and we say no, yes, yeah, maybe so. The last thing was esports, which I said no to. Sorry.
Did they ask you if you wanna offer pickleball?
He's an accomplished pickleball.
They really, well, I play tennis, racket sports. No, they didn't. Certainly the last one was the marathon, BAA, Boston Marathon, was the last topic. And that's a whole side thing, speaking of cartels. The BAA approached DraftKings for money, and DraftKings, I think, was not interested in sponsoring them, and then next thing you know, we don't want you to do the marathon. Okay. So we get approached that all the time. I know this is gonna sound weird, but most of the sort of second, third, fourth tier sport leagues approach us to please take action on them. So if it's did you guys ever see, what's the movie, Dodgeball?
Oh, yeah.
ESPN 8 Ocho, if it's almost a sport, it's on ESPN 8. All of those sports ask us to take action on them, all of them. I mean, sport, I could go through the sports, you're like, that's not a sport. It's, squirrel water skiing, you're like, no, it's not a sport. And so those want to take action only because it legitimizes them and gets more interested. I mean, Mark Cuban, I think, said his franchise doubled in value when we started taking sports money. Sorry, Mike, it's your class, man, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So I recently learned this past summer that casinos in New Hampshire are part of a New Hampshire charitable gaming. Does sports betting also apply in that? And then how do you determine, how much of a say does DraftKings have on that? Does that make sense?
It does. So if it's a bet, it's under our flag. So everything, we regulate or operate or both, everything. Charitable gambling is essentially small card rooms, and they're getting bigger with machines that are kind of like VLTs, but not really. In 3 of those facilities, we also have DraftKings sportsbooks. So the relationship is separate. DraftKings is physically located there. And the reason they're there is because operating a physical sportsbook is remarkably complicated and a giant pain in the ass. I shouldn't swear, but because all of it's in cash. And so if you have an individual betting $10,000, $20,000, it's like having bank levels of controls. And so if you're running a charitable gambling room as well, you have good cash management, and we have oversight over every bit of it, from the doorway to the bathroom, that we regulate for that reason too, because it's our money too. So that's the relationship. They're really just renters, or tenants.
I know that there is legislation that is pending or even inevitable, speaking of the charitable rooms, about increasing the fixed bet limit in
Yes.
New Hampshire from perhaps the maximum fixed bet of $10 going up to $50, much larger poker tournaments being allowed. Is that going to require a larger regulatory apparatus, or is the existing structure enough?
Yes, no. The short answer is, it's gonna require more controls, as there always is. We just started requiring the rooms, not just the last year, requiring them to comply with anti-money laundering rules under FinCEN, because there's a federal law regarding anything over $1 million, you have to have these AML policies in place. And so that's an expensive process. We also have surveillance. Every bit of flow of money is covered under surveillance. It's okay now. I'll tell you in a year from now whether it was too much or not enough. We have a number of investigators, a number of auditors on the payroll that do this full time every day. The scariest parts of the gig are when people and money are in the same place. It's the worst part. Any business, gambling, everywhere. I'll tell you as an ex-prosecutor, the worst time in drug dealing, the worst time, is when the drugs and the money are in the same place. It's the nervous time. So that's what we fear most. It's mostly employee problems and the like. We've had a number of employee issues, not ours, but the operators.
Something that might be an answer for both of you to kind of chime in on is, I thought it was interesting when you're talking about protection of the integrity of the game and, legitimacy. With that NFL suspension group today, 2 of the players were athletes who had bet on non-NFL activities, but they were in the facility, and that was the reasoning behind the suspension. I'm curious to see, like, do you think that that's going to be, because that seems like a weak argument for integrity of the game if it's not relating to the games they're actually playing, but then at the same time, do you think other teams or other sports will take similar action or have that level of like regulation on their athletes?
I would suggest that they're gonna go overboard versus underboard.
Easier to administrate too,
No
right?
question.
This
So-
is one rule.
Have you ever been in an NFL locker room? I have, and NFL training's like, they tell you everywhere you go, do not gamble, do not gamble, do not gamble. It's like in lottery world. Our death penalty is if you play lottery. If one of my employees buys a Powerball ticket, they're fired. There's no suspension, there's no punishment, you are literally walked out the door. There's zero tolerance. They hold for that reason, because who's gonna believe I didn't win Powerball cheating, right? Nobody would. I always joke, if I could have rigged the game, my mom would have won, but,
Didn't Whitey Bulger win twice? Is that
That's my favorite phone call. I was general counsel of the Mass Lottery for a bunch of years. And my favorite phone call was from a U.S. attorney named Jenny Bowl, who now is a magistrate judge, and the Marshal Service to pick up Whitey's check. So Whitey didn't win. Somebody in Southie won, maybe stip our rates. And Whitey, to his credit, gave him a bag of money, gave him $700,000 and said, "You've got partners now." And so he paid for it, and so that he needed, like all bad guys, he needs a legitimate source of income, so that's how Whitey ended up winning. Yeah, so, and then Whitey's sister, Sheila Holland, sued for the money. Yeah, sadly. So yeah, so that's the, it's one of those like bright lines for the NFL, like do not cross, like do anything else, go to a casino, have a ball. It's one of the reasons I thought there would never be a professional team in Vegas.
Yeah.
Although, let's be honest here, they always have like easy home games, because the players visiting, it's like they used to call them, and the playing Miami Heat, you had the South Beach flu.
Yeah, right.
You're a part of them for the next game, you're wrecked for the game.
Yeah, sure. So there's been talks about legalizing sports betting regarding the WWE.
Yeah.
And also the thing I always think that's funny is there's some sports betting companies that allow you to bet on like the color of the Gatorade after the game. So like my theme here is like predetermined things, right? One, how do you feel about that? And two, like I don't know what the New Hampshire law says, but if it does say something or if it does not, like what does it say? And if it doesn't, then how would you like go about construing a law to regulate that?
So the law says that if it looks like it smells like a sport or an event to the sport, we can take wagers on it. So like we can take action on the draft, which, let's be honest here, is predetermined. It's not even run live. Right? It's taped. What we require is you have to bet on it well before, and only the first round. For fear, because that is literally a predetermined event, We know who's going first in the draft, we know who's going second in the draft. Likely a bunch of folks know, and when the guy gets a phone call in the room on tape, that happened half an hour ago. And so
On
now,
Twitter, it's like 3 spots before the actual draft.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like I said, we take that action well in advance, and we, like I said, we would reject the wagers like the color of the Gatorade. It's not that interesting, like the Super Bowl has the most weird prop bets, has like the fat guy special, which is lineman scores, or they have the doink special, which is the kicker hits the post, or the uprights, and they're cute and all, but they don't really bet them. So for me, it's about profitability and keeping it interesting. So if it's interesting, we might think about it, but it's not particularly profitable. Liverpool fan, up the Reds.
Yeah, that's me. So what do you folks do or maybe you don't do this at all, but have you been in talks with leagues that regulate tennis and golf to prevent live on-site sports betting? And when I'm saying this, I mean like sometimes in tennis, you'll have somebody sit courtside who's looking at the game, knows a point's about to be out, and could text that information to a bettor in advance of the point being registered on a scoreboard so that they know the outcome of the bet in advance. Like, how do you guys regulate that? Or are you doing anything to do anything on that subject?
So one of the reasons we chose DraftKings is they have official feeds from the leagues, and it's about the fastest speed feed. Once again, that's a phrase. in existence. It's the points you talk about is actually a soccer game I got in the most trouble for. Somebody bet on Virgil scoring the next goal in a Liverpool game, $500. 3/10 of a second before he scored. Because the feed took a while to get back from Premier League to the computers in Boston. And you can usually get away with that once, twice, by the third time they catch you. And this guy, on the third bet, like I said, it was a Virgil header into the goal, called the governor's office on us and said, they canceled our bet, how dare they? They canceled our account. I'm like, okay, it's what we call in our business fast fingering, hoping somebody hits them as fast as they can. It's more fearful in states that have lawful gambling and professional sports. Because here, you can't be at the game watching it betting. You gotta be in Boston doing it and then hoping you can catch a bet, like text your buddy in New Hampshire, hey, by the way, bet on the next home run being, Mookie Betts. So yeah, it's a fear in our business, but not in my state.
So I'm not super familiar with this type of law, but I was just curious because I always thought that in the US, it was almost like privy to First Nations or Native American tribes, basically to operate certain like gambling or betting facilities on their land.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, it's probably not as much of a New Hampshire issue, but more a federal issue as a whole. Like what effect does this like removal of the ban on sports betting have on Native Americans?
So prior to Indian Game and Regulatory Act, the sovereigns, I shouldn't even quote sovereigns, that's not important. So the state and the sovereign tribes within a jurisdiction had equal rights to place bets. And so Connecticut really caused the problem or caused the solution, depending on your viewpoint, because they had Monte Carlo nights. They had licensed Monte Carlo nights. And so the tribes, the Mashantucket Pequots and the Mohegan Sun tribe, whose name I forget now, filed suit saying you need to give us equal status under sovereign law, under sovereign jurisdiction. We're allowed to do gambling on our jurisdiction. So they were allowed to do card games on the two tribal reservations. Then they cut a deal saying, if you give us exclusive rights to slot machines, we'll give you 25 cents on the dollar. And so every state that has a recognized tribe has that issue. New Hampshire's not one of them. There was a tribe called the Abenakis. They never were recognized. Massachusetts has this problem in spades because of the Mashpee Wampanoags, who cut a deal in the 70s for a bag of pucks, gave it away, their rights. But every tribe has the rights to engage in sports betting on their land in every state where sports betting is authorized, without giving them a dime.
Even without sports betting, just lotteries and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they have the.
Correct. If the state's engaging in gambling someplace, then the tribes have the right to offer it too and give the state nothing. In states where the tribes are given exclusive rights to engage in casino gambling, like Oklahoma, I think Oklahoma has 60 casinos in it. Some half the size of this room. They have
State gets a cut.
State gets a cut, correct. You give the tribes the exclusive rights to do that. And in many ways, it's an empowerment issue in terms of making sure the tribes get reimbursed for the atrocities on them. Like Maine, for example, just gave their two tribes the rights to mobile sports betting. Didn't have to, but the two tribes own that right and are giving a very small percentage to the state for it. I think it's 10%.
Yeah.
What would you say to young professionals who are looking to get into the sports betting industry? I guess more specifically, what advice would you give if someone was trying to get into compliance or sport betting regulation or risk assessment?
That's a good question. The business is, because I've had this question a bunch, and the answer I'd have given you 3 years ago is not the answer to give you now. I'd find a reputable operator that's large in scale and global in scale versus small operators that are offering you suites because they're equivalent. You're all too young to remember the dot-com bust. But there's a lot of people in the space that are trying to get into, elbow their way in, and they're all very low tier, short money folks. I would pick my sights on a larger operator and be willing to move. Funny story. So Mass took a bunch of illegal bets. I don't know if you heard the story. They took bets on Harvard in Massachusetts. One of the rules with Mass is, like us, you can't bet on in-state sports. The reason they did that is because it was a European developer who thought Harvard was in Connecticut. Because he thought it was Hartford. So he literally was like, oh, that's fine, Connecticut. The chair of the Mass Gaming Commission, who was a dear friend of mine, went to Harvard. Kathy Judstein. She's like, I can't believe this, they got my school wrong. So I might be willing to move because a lot of those compliance departments are based in certain geographic areas. Like DraftKings is the closest one I can think of to us. FanDuel obviously is in New York. Other operators in New Jersey and Nevada. They have facilities here. They have to host their locations in state, but their compliance departments are out of state.
We have time for maybe one more question. Yeah.
So the NCAA seems to be a lot more reactive than proactive whenever there's any sort of legal issue, as it seems is the case here again. Is there any plan to work with the NCAA or maybe force them to kind of be more in line with like the regulations and things that the NFL has in place? Or is it just kind of wait and see if they'll do something or more likely get sued and have to adhere that way?
Boy, you've asked me what the meaning of life is, haven't you? It's hard to deal with folks who don't like to be accommodating. I haven't had a bad experience with them yet. I'll be fair to them. They haven't done anything saying no. It's just, we're a sovereign state. You know this is happening. Locally, you've reached out to me, but at no point have you sort of globally said to the sports betting regulators, there's a group of us. All right, let's meet and chat and talk about ways to do this. There's been no conversation like that anywhere. And I don't know what's going to take from them. I think, to Mike's point, I think they're looking to have the colleges take care of it and do it locally, which will not work. They didn't work.
Schools don't have the resources. They're busy, right? Like they don't have the bandwidth to take that on.
No, and it's not you don't worry about the Alabamas of the world. You worry about the Appalachian states of the world. I mean, that's really, Alabama's got plenty of resources for instance. But it's the smaller schools where we still take action on, or the Florida Atlantic University. The 9th seed, the tournament gets to the Final Four. Those are the folks you're worried about, only because there's no incentive for anybody to do anything until there's a problem and be reactionary to your point.
And the athletes they're not paid other than NIL, so the temptations, of course, are different.
No question, there's no question. And most of them are there actually get education,
Yep.
So.
One question, no to esports, was that a hard decision? Is that,
No.
what's the sort of?
Super easy.
Okay. Yeah.
So, within our law says we can't take action on anything where the average age of the participant is under 18, which I think esports is or close to. Second, I would say at least weekly, if not more often. I get a notice from about esports, a match being fixed. It's number 1 or 2 with the hit parade in terms of tennis being the ones folks price fix on. I mean, esports it's got years to go before it's to that point. It really does. Despite the amount of money in it, seems like there's a significant amount of money in it, but not a significant amount of oversight.
Yeah. Any others? I think we are just about out of time, so thank you very much.
Of course, Mike.
I will turn it back over to our editor-in-chief. Thank you. Yeah, I'll talk to you. Yeah. Thank you.
So now we're gonna have a panel on sports betting and cryptocurrency. And our 2 speakers are going to be Andrew Tops and Samson Williams. So I will go with Samson first. Samson Williams is joining us from Washington, D.C., where he hones his trade as a classically trained anthropologist who specializes in crisis management for banks, financial institutions, and the odd government agency. While not in D.C., Samson can be found traveling around Europe and the Middle East lecturing on fintech, the intersection of blockchain and the space economy, and how technology transforms social capital into financial capital. Samson is an adjunct professor at the University of New Hampshire School of Law, an instructor at Columbia University in New York City, where he lectures on AI ethics, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and the space economy. In his spare time, Samson is president of the Crowdfunding Professional Association and investor and head cheerleader for GoingPublic.com, an SEC-regulated Reg A+ investment crowdfunding platform. Last but not least, Samson is a gummy bear aficionado, so he bores you with his talk about cryptos, NFTs, real estate, and the fifth industrial revolution. Ask him about his favorite gummy bears. For more information on Samson, visit www.samsonwilliams.com and follow him on social at HustleFunBaby. Andrew Tops. Andrew Tops is a graduate of the University of New Hampshire Law School of class of 2022, and he was part of the first class of the Tiber program. He grew up in the Chicagoland area where he played football, basketball, and track in high school. After graduating high school, he attended the University of Missouri where he played football. And completed a degree in broadcast journalism. He was a television sports reporter for 7 years throughout Missouri and Oklahoma. After his time as a sportscaster, he earned his MBA from the University of Iowa. Andrew has been a regional sales manager for the last 9 years. He currently resides in Scottsdale, Arizona with his wife and daughter. So I will now turn everything over to Professor Michael Dube, who will moderate this discussion. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon to Andrew and Samson and everybody here in the room at UNH Law. Andrew, if you don't mind if I start with you, your article, which I've read, makes clear that sports betting in the US has undergone not just an evolution, but a significant revolution in the past decade or so. Could you take us through some of that absolutely fascinating history?
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy how quickly this industry is going. I know Director McIntyre touched on it, talking about the PAPSA, Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, that was signed into law in Congress in 1992. Fast forward to 2018, it was overturned by the Supreme Court, and now sports betting is legal in, I believe, 40 states. And just to show you how quickly this moved, I am a UNH Law graduate. I hosted the sports betting panel last year, and Director McIntyre was gracious enough to be a part of it, and so was Professor McCann. And in just that year, when I hosted last year in April, sports betting was not legal in Massachusetts, Maine, or Vermont. So really, New Hampshire was the only game in town. Now Massachusetts has legalized it; it's up and running. Maine has legalized it. It's not necessarily running in Maine yet. They're a bit slower to get that up and running. And Vermont, sports betting legalization is currently moving through the Senate, a couple Senate committees. So, just that quickly, 1 year, how many states in the Northeast have passed sports betting? It's been a crazy growth. As Director McIntyre was talking about, there's several different interests that you have to provide for. I'm out here in Arizona, so there's a huge tribal gaming component. You also have the professional sports teams that have their gaming. They have sports books there with the Suns, go Suns, by the way, and all the other sports teams out here. Each stadium has a sports book within it. And then, you got the colleges where they're, I just saw something where Michigan State's partnering now with Caesars. Director McIntyre was talking about sports betting in colleges. I was a former college athlete to home with the 2025 SEC champion Missouri Tigers. We need 2 years, so just to get on board. But it's crazy how fast everything is moving. And to show you what was said last year when Chairwoman Judge Stein, who was director of Massachusetts Gaming Commission, she said we should come back and have another panel with her once they legalized it, because what she said just a year ago may not even hold true today, and what we're saying today may not even hold true in another year. So it's been very crazy and very rapid growth with sports betting, especially with the apps. Out here in Arizona, we were inundated with commercials. It was, you could not turn on the TV, YouTube, anything. It was whatever, Bet MGM, Caesars, this and that. It was just, it got too much. And, even as a sports betting, kind of backer, it was too much even for me. So it's just been crazy how quickly the growth has taken place within this industry.
One more question for you, Andrew, before we turn to Samson and questions about cryptocurrency and gummy bears, which is that, as your article very sagely points out, since, in 2018, the Supreme Court declared PASPA unconstitutional in the Murphy case, and yet that ultimately covers the legality of intrastate betting, something that Director McIntyre also alluded to. Your paper does a very nice job, your article does a very nice job of taking the reader through some challenges that remain in terms of inter-sports betting and explain and contextualize why it is that things are happening on a state-by-state level. I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The big things, really the Wire Act, 19 signed it into action by President Kennedy, 1961. That essentially back then, and I'll read from the actual law, whoever is engaged in the business of sports betting knowingly uses a wire communication facility for the transmission in interstate or foreign commerce of bets or wagers, that's essentially against the law. And that big part, interstate or foreign. So we have subsequent cases, Yaquinta and Camercell, that kind of uphold that as to where you can't use a transmission that crosses state lines. So what does that mean? Camercell, and again, this is from Professor McCann. I took his sports betting class. Professor McIntyre. They were all in that sports betting too. So kind of full circle here. But in that Camercell case, what happened was this guy back in 1997, he was using AIM Instant Messenger, and I'm dating myself. I'm old enough to remember using that as well. But he sent a bomb threat from Utah. And he just sent it into, I believe it was his girlfriend's computer at school, who was also in Utah. But what happened is that transmission was routed from Utah to the servers in Virginia and back to Utah. So even though the destination and origin of the transmission were the same, that crossing of state lines from Virginia and back is what we understand today in sports betting law to have crossed interstate lines. So despite destination and origin being the same, any transmission that crosses state lines for any brief amount of time is considered to be a violation of that Wire Act because it crosses state lines. So this is where you get into the geofencing. I know Director McIntyre talked about this last year, that the one liquor store right over the border in Massachusetts, that's where everybody is. And then you see them leave. And, back when it was illegal in Massachusetts, they would go right there to that first stop in New Hampshire, make their bets on their phone and then head on back, because once you cross state lines, you cannot, once that transmission crosses state lines, it's a violation of the Wire Act. Now, the problem here is everybody's kind of too scared to violate that, right? So in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Maine, sports betting is legal. So the big issue was when it was illegal, you could be hit with Wire Act violations. Now it's a bit more gray area because it had to be illegal in the states, right? It had to be illegal in each state. So now a transmission that crosses from New Hampshire into Massachusetts, it's a bit more of a gray area. It's probably still not something you want to do, but there have been talk of compacts, especially in the Northeast with most northeastern states, you know, having legalized it, that could be something that could be a challenge to the Wire Act. And again, going back to when the Wire Act was launched, it was 1961, right? So you were placing bets on phones, and you had to have actual transmissions going across, you know, hardwired signals. Now, 90% of it is done on phones, right? So it's the transmission on phones is really what's been the big kind of roadblock to it. So it's going to be interesting with more states that are now legalizing it, whether they're going to violate the Wire Act, because essentially what that is, it's a federal supplement to state law where it's illegal. So out here out west, it's still not legal in California, and it's still not legal in Utah. So me in Arizona, if I place a bet, the transmission crosses into California or Utah, I could be prosecuted under that. But now going to the Northeast, it's not as clear. It's still probably not something that, you know, you want to do, but it could change very, very quickly. So it's one of those, and I stated in the paper too, the Wire Act needs to be updated because it's outdated. You know, it's going back with the organized crime era, you know, the Goodfellas, casino, all that stuff. And so I'm not saying that's gone away, but now with everybody having more computing power than what sent man to the moon walking around in their pocket, you know, it needs to be updated for the 21st century going forward.
So enter cryptocurrency into this discussion, and this is where I'll turn to Samson. Really two questions for you. The first is that I am surely far less sophisticated than everybody else in this room, and I still rely on the I know it when I see it definition in terms of cryptocurrency. I'm wondering whether you could provide a little more sophisticated of a definition, and also talk about how that industry, and of course it is an industry, has evolved over the past decade, really in parallel with the evolution of sports betting as an industry.
Give me one moment. I'm just writing myself a note so I don't forget your actual questions. First off, I went to Florida State University, the greatest university for undergrad in the world, since we're talking about sports betting. And we are the premier sports university. We even have academics. To understand what is crypto, I'm going to make you all blockchain experts in the next 60 seconds. This is a group text message. I have $100. I send Andrew $10. I send Jacob $20. And so I've sent this. It's all in this group text message. It's distributed. It's timestamped. It's immutable just because Andrew throws away his phone. Joey and Jessica still have their record on their phone. So ta-da, you've just created a blockchain. It's an immutable distributed ledger of timestamp transactions. That's it. And so now that you understand, oh, a blockchain is just like a group text message, most people use it for the most simplest thing, which is creating quote unquote cryptocurrencies. And the currency doesn't actually get created. It's just the record of debt, the transaction history in that group text message that everyone can see. And so when everyone can see this group text message and they can see the bets we all made are the money that's been distributed, I can't go back and say I have $1 million. Because you can scroll up in the group text or down in the group text and say, Samson, you got $70. Because I saw when you gave Andrew 10, I saw when you gave Jacob 20. And so now it's indisputable proof I don't have $1 million. Same thing if we were tracking a bet. And so again, the cheapest, easiest, laziest way to use blockchain technology is the creation of money. You're actually not creating any type of money. You're just memorializing the record of debt. And there's an anthropologist named David Graeber who has a great book called Debt, the First 5,000 Years, which helps you understand how money is actually just a record of debt. So when we talk about what is cryptocurrency, someone has gone and created their own group text message, and this is a beautiful hustle. I love it so much. If you give me your monies, this is Juan. You give me your monies, I will give you my crypto. Andrew, accept my crypto. Here you go. Stick your hand. Excellent. So I take his money, he takes my crypto. One of us is very happy with this transaction because I've taken his rent money and now I've given him my crypto. Hopefully he can spend that crypto somewhere. So it's less about you've actually made money or there's value in that. Let's use my Jamaican dollar instead because it's $100. So when people translate this in my dirhams, this is from UAE, we're taking your hard-earned money and I'm giving you this. When I say I'm giving you this, I literally mean this. You can't see it, smell it, touch it. It's a line of code. It exists in the matrix or on this group text message that is insert name of blockchain, whether you want to call it Ethereum, Doge, Bitcoin, it's just a blockchain. There's not one blockchain. There are many blockchains. So I've given you this branded thing. And based on the fact that you gave me your money, your rent money, your earnings, you now believe that this has value. Ta-da. So at the end of the day, cryptos are very similar to money in that they are an act of faith. So you've heard about the rumors about Bitcoin, and I always like to ask people, how does Bitcoin generate revenue? We go around in a circle, then we realize Bitcoin's not a company. It's actually not money. It's the translating of you paying your energy bill for the electricity to mine it. Are you giving someone your money for it? In which case you just transferred your physical fiat government issued money into this digital thing. So that's crypto. The question is, what applications does it have in betting? So it's actually pretty cool because you've been to a casino or not. I'll find a good one. You take your real money and the casino will give you a token. The only thing is this is a physical token versus a digital token. So in a betting sense, you could change your dollars, your government issued dollars, into some type of digital token. You can call it a coupon, you can call it a token, you can call it a cryptocurrency. However, you need the marketplace to use this digital currency. Remember, in this instance, because this is a physical token, it's actually a 50-cent euro piece. Because this is a physical token, you can see it. Otherwise, I give you this record, this group text message. I give you this record that says, I took 100 of these and turned it into 100 of these invisible things you can't see that you can only use in my casino. So this is where cryptocurrencies, or rather blockchain technology, does have an application in the fact that in the casino's group text message, it knows who's there. You do KYC, AML, anti-money laundering, know your customers, because you enable people to access your group text message. Your group text message is the casino, because after you've given me your cash, I give you these digital things that's probably attached to your phone number, so you can gamble with your phone, or rather use your phone as your wallet for your digital thingamajiggy. And now you're welcome to spend your cryptocurrency, your MGM crypto, anywhere within the MGM casino. However, based on some work I did out with some tribal folks in Oklahoma, the casinos are so heavily regulated as it is, they do not want to introduce this new novel, unproven, does not add anything to their bottom line customer loyalty widget called a digital currency. Because if you think about your loyalty points, these digital things act no different. Also, they have to have a set value. So if someone gives you $100 and you give them 100 of your crypto or 25 of your crypto, this crypto, it needs to have a set value. Otherwise, it's probably going to be a security. Because if you give someone $100 and they buy this digital gummy bear and it goes up in value through no efforts of their own, it's a security. So when we're talking about crypto, we're really talking about blockchain. Very easy. The laziest application of blockchain technology is making digital gummy bears or cryptocurrencies. The best application of blockchain technology is identification, meaning we've identified that this is Samson Williams, and because we know his true identity, we can then tack on his health records, his medical records, his driving records, his universal ID, concealed weapons permit, his insurance, because we have validated that this is the real Samson, because we have this group text message. We validated that this phone number 555-954-3126 is actually Samson. So that's the best use of blockchain technology. So just to close out that first question, yes, there is use for blockchain or cryptocurrencies within the casino and betting world, but again, only as digital currency or digital representation of casino chips. And so when we look at the evolution of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, it's really how to use blockchain for loyalty programs. Meaning, I know it's this Andrew Tops. He's a high roller. I validated this. I put it on the block. I put this is the MGM blockchain. So when Andrew Tops shows up, I know exactly who it is. Whether I've scanned some biometric, say this is Andrew. Remember, MGM has their own group text message, so they can see his entire betting history because he signed up with this. And so the real question is, when Andrew runs for office in 10 or 15 years, does he really want his entire betting history to be known by anyone who has access to this? And so this is where we're going to, as we evolve the industry, we're not only going to talk about blockchain and its uses for digital loyalty points or digital tracking mechanisms, we're going to actually talk about surveillance capitalism. Because the reason I love cash so much, it's a bearer instrument. As soon as I give this to Benjamin, there's no proof he got it from me. As soon as I give you as soon as I give Jessica or Jenny one of these digital thingamajiggies, create an immutable distributed digital fingerprints for each and every transaction. And so this is where, as the industry, one, it's much easier to regulate, but two, it brings up a lot of privacy concerns. And for the folks who might be running for office in the future, the question is, do you really want an immutable distributed record of all of your betting or financial transactions? So I'm going to pause there to see if you have any questions, because that leads us to a conversation about CBDCs, our central bank digital currencies, which are evil.
Well, I'll put that on hold for a second and try to tie together both threads of this conversation. We've established what cryptocurrency is and how it interfaces with the concept of blockchain. We've talked about how numerous states, at this point, the vast majority of states, have legalized sports betting on an intrastate basis, at least, and some of the doctrinal reasons why it has to be intrastate. I guess my next question for Andrew is, are there any states, of all of the states that have legalized sports betting on an intrastate basis, are there any states that actually accept cryptocurrency as payment, or more precisely, allow operators to accept cryptocurrency as payment in connection with the placing of sports bets?
Yes, there are two, and I believe maybe a third one is possibly getting into it. The first one was Wyoming. Wyoming legalized sports betting, and by statute, they have legalized the accepting of cryptocurrencies for sports bets. The other state is Colorado. Again, similar, they're neighboring states. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but Colorado has statutorily legalized cryptocurrency with sports betting. So you're able to do those in those two states. And I believe there's some talk about legalizing it in Virginia as well. But right now, currently, as it sits, of all the states that have legalized sports betting, Colorado, Wyoming are the two where you can legally bet with crypto.
Are there any impediments to that on the federal level? I know one of the themes here is the sort of intersection between federal law and federal law sort of being backward-looking and state law being forward-looking.
It's one of those things that I bring up in the article, and also after having taken Professor Williams's class too on crypto, and make sure you ask him about how great NFTs are too. I just want to throw that out there. But as far as the federal level, it's really up in the air. It's one of those things that has become my favorite refrain after going through law school. It depends, and it's really going to depend on how they treat it. Is it going to be a security, like Samson said? Is it going to be a commodity? Is it going to be an asset? Is it going to be something completely different? Because there really is no federal treatment of cryptocurrency. All I can really say for sure is that they treat it as income, but how you're going to be able to bet with it is very, very up in the air. The Biden administration put forth an executive order telling the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission, not the best sports conference in the world, to get a look at, to see how they want to classify it. But really, this was last year in March, but really no news has come, from that since.
Very, very interesting. And I agree that it is a gray area completely right now. Samson, a question for you, which is, how does any entity that accepts cryptocurrency as payment, and this certainly could apply to a sports book, how do they address the volatility? And I should say, I don't mean to pick on cryptocurrency. If I went to Target and paid for some light bulbs with AMC stock, I could imagine that there's going to be an issue there in terms of Target handling the volatility. But I mean, what if a coin gets wiped out between the time that I place a bet on the Patriots to win the Super Bowl and the time that that bet settles many months down the line? How could sports books and how does industry writ large deal with this volatility?
You talk to whoever is your head of risk management, because that's a risk decision that you have to balance. Because most folks, if you buy, I'm just going to use Dogecoin. When I used to teach in Dubai, I would give out Dogecoin to the classroom because it was like 0.0001%. It was a fraction of a penny, so that people would pay attention. And so one day it spiked to like 20 cents. It went from a fraction of a penny to 20 cents, and it peaked at 70 cents. So everybody in the UAE was very excited because they were rich, because I would give out Dogecoin. But if you did not sell at the top of the market, it went from 70 cents down to 5 or 6 cents. And so at every point along the way, you are hedging your bets. And so if you accept Bitcoin, or if you accept any type of cryptocurrency, you want to immediately accept it and then charge a service fee of somewhere between 3 to 5%, because you have to convert it from your digital gummy bear that is your crypto back to cash. And you're going to pay an exchange. If you're doing this with Ethereum, depending on the price of what is called gas, if you might be paying $50 in gas fees to convert $10 from Ethereum into US dollars. So again, this is something you have to figure out with your risk managers. Generally speaking, in the past, when we would advise folks, it's if you sell something for $100, charge a 3.5% conversion fee because you have to pay the exchange, and then immediately liquidate it. There are people who are like, oh, we're going to accept it. We're going to accept this $100. We're going to set it aside for 30, 60, 90 days and ride it out. They're accepting the risk that they accepted $100 worth of Bitcoin with the anticipation that it will go up. And so they accept that risk. There's no magic solution to that. I would just want to remind everyone that market sentiment literally translates out to how much faith do the humans who are using these digital dice to gamble online have in these digital dice.
That's a great point. And I suppose that obviously sports betting carries with it some risk to all parties, be that the books or the participants. Something that is interesting to me is that DraftKings lost close to $750 million last year. So this is an industry that's not, at least an operator that's not immediately profitable. So Samson, I have one more question for you, but it's based on something in Andrew's article. So, and then I'll go back to Andrew about this. Andrew writes in his article something that's very, very interesting, which is that some US sports books have begun to accept cryptocurrency, but in a rather diluted sense, insofar as the currency is immediately converted prior to any betting taking place. So it's not like you're betting with a fraction of a coin. Your coin is being converted to dollars through a third-party intermediary, and then those dollars can be used to wager upon a given event that the book is taking action on. And so is that too impure to really constitute? It was a very fascinating point made by Andrew in his paper. Is that too diluted to be really the first instance of a sports book really taking cryptocurrency?
You have to keep in mind that Endeavor just bought the WWE. Endeavor is a parent company of Ultimate Fighting Club, UFC. And so they're planning on doing betting for scripted matches using Ernst & Young. I'm super pumped about this, by the way. I'm a Hulk Hogan, Randy, the Junkyard Dog type of person. Why I bring this up is that's marketing. And so if you're a betting platform, you're like, oh yeah, bring us your crypto. Because no one told you that your crypto, your stable coin, your tokens, I love stable coins because stable coins, I call them prepaid debit cards, meaning you give me your dollars, I'll give you the stable coin. You give me $100, it's pegged to the stable coin dollar for dollar. You just defined a prepaid debit card. And so when you're looking at the betting platforms that say, oh, we accept Bitcoin, Ethereum, Doge, Solana, whatever, that's marketing, because once you get into the operations, the nuts and bolts, they got to convert it. Otherwise, the risk is going like this. And one more point about cryptos in general, because I forgot to tell you what is a crypto. Cryptos don't solve a living wage. You get paid in Doge, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, you get paid. Do you earn a living wage? Because I could pay you in avocados or diamonds or gold, you still might not earn a living wage. So just because someone's saying, hey, I'm going to compensate you in Bitcoin, does not mean you actually earn enough to live in DC, New York, or wherever you happen to be.
Very, very interesting. I can imagine a fascinating Fair Labor Standards Act about minimum wage if somebody's paid in cryptocurrency and the value diminishes below the applicable minimum wage prior to a certain point in time. I guess my last question before I open it up is for Andrew, because I found your paper so fascinating, and I want to ask you about it, sort of an ultimate conclusion, which is, where do you see sports betting and cryptocurrency in 3 years, let's say, or 5 years? Do you see operators routinely accepting it as a form of payment, or is this something that's further off or might not happen at all unless the federal government steps in?
I think you're going to have a few enterprising states. Again, they already do, Colorado, Wyoming. You could have a few enterprising states that already accept it. I think in order for mass acceptance, you do need federal regulation of some sort. You know, what that looks like, at the very least, a classification, securities, commodity asset, whichever one. You already have, again, I know Director McIntyre has probably talked about this several times, offshore sports books are already accepting it, right? Bovada is the one that comes to mind. You can use crypto to bet with them. So it's going to be something that legislatures, both statewide and federally, are going to have to consider. Again, it's a widely done activity, which calls for regulation, right? Because it's illegal right now. It's not so much illegal with crypto, but it's a question of whether it's absolutely legal. So you have to legalize it by statute. I see federal regulation similar to sports betting, right? Look what happened with sports betting. It was illegal in all but, prior to the PAPS being overturned in 2018, it was illegal in all but 5 states, and then really the only true sports betting place was Nevada, and you had to go inside, on the strip, or wherever, and go to the sports book. Now, since 2018, 40 states have legalized sports betting. I think you'll see a similar thing if there's similar treatment to crypto, that they say, hey, look, this is what it is. This is how we do it. I think you'll see a similar explosion to, the acceptance of crypto, true crypto, not, kind of database run crypto, which is what I kind of allude to in the article. But true crypto, if the federal government decides to step in and actually regulate it.
I want to open up, these speakers are great resources, open up the floor to questions for a few moments and see if anybody has any questions about sports betting, cryptocurrency, the interface between the two, or gummy bears. Yeah.
It's more of a comment than a question, but Samson had mentioned, the privacy that comes in with cryptocurrency, let's say like MGM, if you were to get like an MGM type of cryptocurrency thing. I mean, how much privacy even is there with, take it a step further, or a step below, when you're signing up for these casinos, where they have these loyalty programs. Your information is already in there the minute you enter into this, whether you're paying cash or crypto. So I think that's an interesting concept. That's like, if you're already engaging in this type of activity and your name is already out there and information is already out there, then is privacy something that you're really concerned about at that point? And then you look at the privacy aspect of it and it's, okay, well then how do you regulate how much information is actually getting revealed to the general public? Is it that you just have an account with MGM? Or is it that you're this type of, a member within their loyalty program? So it's an interesting thing to think about.
I don't know if the two of you were able to hear, there was a very interesting comment about privacy vis-a-vis participation in these sportsbook operations. I don't know if either of you would like to comment on that, or the privacy aspects of blockchain or cryptocurrency.
I can't recall the professor. He's from Nova Southeastern. He was at the IPSI last summer. He was at the some are IP intensive, but he outlined how there's no privacy in the metaverse. There's no Fourth Amendment in the metaverse. And so why that's important is because when I give you this digital gummy bear, it's going to go into your virtual wallet. And once you go to that third party, you don't have an expectation of privacy. And so, if you're paranoid like me and you deal in a variety of different caches from around the world, that's something that unfortunately my generation won't have to deal with because I'll be dead. But your kids' generation will live in a world where your credit score, your social ranking can all be easily determined based upon your financial habits, your spending habits. And that's just some Black Mirror type shenanigans that you guys should all figure out. Andrew?
Yeah, data privacy obviously is huge, and that's what everybody's worried about, right? The question is, how do you guard against it? 90% of hacks are just poor cybersecurity on the back end by people involved in the organization, right? They click on a link they shouldn't have clicked on. But once that does happen, how do you protect that? And I don't know. So the question was asked, do you want your Blockbuster? Again, I'm dating myself. Do you want your Blockbuster rental history getting out there? Do you want your library book history, getting out there? It's a huge concern, because I get probably once a quarter an email saying, hey, we've looked at this data breach on whether it's, Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, or, whatever other platform you're on, saying, your password may have been compromised. What if it's more than password? Look at Target, look at some of these other huge companies. I would say treat it like your data has already been breached, and just continually change your passwords and update it like that, because that's probably the best. To me, that's the best way to do it. As it's going to get out there. It's just a question of how much can you mitigate that, and what's done in the dark shall come to light. That's just kind of how I've always lived, and anybody out there, take my 2 cents if it's even worth that. So
Any other questions? All right, well, I really
Ryan raised his hand.
Yes.
Hey, thanks. Thought you were gonna pass over me there. But my question is, you mentioned gas and kind of that conversion fee for taking a cryptocurrency and putting it into real money. So what is the point really of making a bet using cryptocurrency if it would be more profitable for you to just use regular cash or your debit card?
Well, Ryan, I just go back to stable coins that are pegged dollar for dollar, USDT, etc. If you have to give me $1 so you can get this virtual dollar, why don't you just use $1? Or why don't you use, very few people take American Express. Why don't you use your Visa or MasterCard? And so why are you creating that extra layer of complication and a middleman? What I do love about cryptos is that the exchanges, they make money when it's going down, they make money when it's going up. And so why you would add that extra layer of complexity, I don't know. It's probably super helpful if you're laundering funds. But I think that what you'll see, the SEC just said that Bittrex was engaged in selling unregistered securities. Bittrex is a cryptocurrency exchange. And so you'll see that the SEC will follow up so that if you're an exchange making money, you're either selling unregistered securities or the thingamajiggies who are selling our commodities and governed by the CFTC.
I was waiting for the word laundering to be uttered. I want to thank both of you for really exceptional insight.
Can I just say one thing? Shitty data on a blockchain is just shitty data on a blockchain. If you don't clean your data, do not make it immutable. That's it. And the last thing is ChatGPT. That data on there has not been cleaned in any way. And in many instances, if it's about the space economy, my partner and I, George, we purposely put incorrect calculations to throw off our competitors when they use ChatGPT.
Thanks, Samson.
Yeah, thank you, Samson. Thank you, Andrew. Very insightful. So now our final segment, we're gonna turn to a Q&A with Professor McCann and Professor Mark Conrad. And so to read off Professor Conrad's bio. Mark Conrad is a full-time faculty member at Fordham's Gabelli School of Business, where he directs the Gabelli Sports Business Initiative, an academic center which seeks to explore cutting-edge issues in sports and invites guest speakers to discuss, debate, and analyze current issues in the sports community. Professor Conrad teaches classes in sports law, the business of sport, diversity, equity, and inclusion in sports, media law, arts law, and contracts and business organizations for undergraduate and graduate students. In addition to his full-time responsibilities at Fordham, Professor Conrad has served as an adjunct professor at Columbia University's master's program in sports management, where he leads international and comparative sports law. In addition, he teaches a sports law class at St. John's University School of Law. Professor Conrad has appeared on panels and symposia at leading academic institutions, including Harvard Law School and law schools at Duke University, University of Virginia, NYU, and Arizona State. He also spoke at Northwestern University School of Communications in Doha, Qatar. Professor Conrad's books and articles have appeared in academic, legal, and general circulation publications. His book, The Business of Sports, Off the Field, in the Office, on the News, has been cited in leading journals as one of the most comprehensive texts on the subject. He also has published in numerous academic and non-academic journals on various sports law topics, including governance issues, intellectual property, collegiate and international issues. His most recent research centers on the question on how to regulate sports betting, advertising, and promotions in the present environment of varying state regulations and the overriding constitutional protections for commercial speech. Professor Conrad has been quoted in periodicals such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, and the Chicago Tribune, and has appeared on CNN, I-24 News, and Bloomberg TV. He is a member of the editorial board of Law. Professor Conrad received his BA from the City College of New York and his JD from the New York Law School. After receiving his law degree, he became a Columbia Lion, where he earned an MS from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. He is a member of the New York and District of Columbia bars. He's now retired. He served as president of the Sports and Recreation Law Association from 2014 to 2015 and president of the Alliance for Sport from 2016 to 2018. A lifelong resident of New York City, Professor Conrad points to running the New York City Marathon as one of his most memorable achievements. He may be followed on Twitter at @SportsLaw1. So give it up for Professor Conrad.
Work? No? Okay.
It works, yeah.
It works, okay. And thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation to come to UNH. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank Jacob, thank Professor McCann for arranging this. And I know it's the last discussion of the day, and I know the food is getting ready. So hopefully this will be of some interest. I will actually discuss my current research on a topic that has not been discussed as often as it should be. You know, in the wake of the permission of states to legalize betting, we have seen an onslaught in advertising all over the country. New York has been the largest state to legalize sports betting, and can anybody guess how much has been bet in New York in the first year 2022? In its handle? How can anybody come up with a guess? Yeah.
I don't know, 2 billion.
Higher.
Okay.
It's like Price is Right, you gotta think of
18 billion.
16, pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, you went over about $16 billion in the handle in New York alone, about 10 billion in New Jersey. I mean, I have a list of other states, but you're talking cumulatively over $50 to $60 billion bet. At the same time, we have seen advertising in all sorts of media throughout the country. And the question is going to be, how do we regulate this kind of advertising? Now, the states have their own systems because it's been a piecemeal approach as each state has legalized sports betting in the way it does, how it does, and also has various regulatory bodies. And some of the regulations have dealt with advertising. And most states have come up with some kind of regimen saying, well, the advertising can't be false and deceptive. It can't be targeted to those under 21. In some states, there has to be problem gambling notices and phone numbers to call. Some states have a certain font size for the notices or taking a certain percentage of, you think of a screen or web page to do it. And some states have tried to regulate this a little bit more than others. So I think Ohio and Massachusetts probably get the awards, if you can call them awards, for the more active attempts to regulate sports betting, particularly with the notion of what's called free bets. And some of you have seen these ads about free bets. Free bets are not free bets. Basically, what they are in various forms, although they are, to be fair, changing, was that, yes, you were able to bet, but the winnings stay in, or the amounts stay in an account that you can't really just take out and say, oh, that's great, it's free. We have to put a certain sum of money in to allow the free bet, and your first bet is on them, or $100, et cetera. I get these promos on, from emails all the time, but at least they don't call them free bets anymore, and that's thanks to Ohio. But it does not look at the deeper question, and the deeper question has been really summarized by a member of Congress. It was a representative from upstate New York. Those of us from New York, it's the city versus upstate, and yes, we think of upstate as part of New York, but it's a representative I've actually not heard of before, Representative Tonko, that introduced legislation to come up with a national ban on tobacco advertising, very much like the ban on tobacco advertising from the broadcast media, mainly radio and television. And I'll be here to discuss, while that may be a lofty goal in some minds, and has certainly forced the industry, at least voluntarily, to think, ooh, Congress may be on our tail, to come up with voluntary guidelines. And some of you may have seen this yesterday. A number of entities got together and said, we're gonna actually be good boys and girls, have ads that are not gonna be deceptive, they're gonna appeal to adults, our products, we want to not encourage too much gambling, et cetera, in response. So in that sense, if you're an advocate for advertising restriction, the bill is not a bad idea. From a legal point of view, it's my opinion, it is constitutionally defective. And the reason being are twofold. One, the change in approach to regulating commercial speech vis-a-vis the First Amendment. And the second, the change, or at least the implicit change, in broadcast regulation that has occurred since the halcyon days of 1971, when tobacco advertising was indeed formally banned from the airways. Plus, the circumstances are different. So, with all due deference to your constitutional law professors, this is not a constitutional law class, but just a little bit of background. In the mid-20th century, you began to see a crystallization of greater First Amendment protection in a number of areas of speech. Political speech, the idea of the president's standard began to be crystallized in the so-called Brandenburg case, which the Imminent Lawless Action case, but more, in other areas as well, the standard for obscenity was tightened in the Miller case, in the so-called Miller test, and advertising was sort of left out in the lurch because commercial speech was actually determined not to be in the First Amendment orbit as recently as 1942 in a Supreme Court case, and said, if the speech is for commercial purposes, it's commerce, and commerce is really not the goal of the First Amendment. Well, that was a doctrinal law for really 30, 40 years. And for 30, 40 years, there were a number of cases that had laws upholding restrictions on billboards, for tobacco, for gambling and the like in the 20s and 30s. Not so much gambling, but mainly tobacco, alcohol, even when alcohol was re-legalized, if you will, when prohibition was banned. There were fairly frequent restrictions under state power to regulate health and safety. What was happening though by the 1960s and 70s, that began to be chipped away, and it was a greater awareness that commercial speech is speech. And finally, in 1976, in the so-called Virginia pharmacy case, the Supreme Court formally constitutionalized commercial speech and said, hey, by the way, it's in the First Amendment orbit. However, the courts have had a hard time doing a couple of things. One, defining what exactly commercial speech is. You'd think that would be a given, but there's some variations of that definition. And number two, what tests do you use to possibly justify regulations on advertising? And this came about in 1980 in the so-called Central Hudson Standard, which is a 4-part standard that the Supreme Court came up with that has been the subject of about at least a dozen cases since then, which means the Supreme Court's been fairly busy looking at how you craft the standard. And many of the cases involve what we call sin advertising. Sin advertising is tobacco, gambling, alcohol. Those were the sins. Legalized sins for the most part now. Gambling also in some jurisdictions too, but of course tobacco and alcohol. So the question is, what do you do with this? And the Central Hudson test is a 4-part test. The first part says, if the speech is false and deceptive, it gets no protection. Not in the constitutional orbit. That's why I have a Federal Trade Commission regulating. That's why you can have some of the states regulating, say it's false and deceptive. Don't even make a First Amendment claim. But if it's so-called truthful speech, then you get to 2, 3, and 4. And number 2 is the state has to have a substantial interest, not compelling, substantial. And the third part of the test is that the regulation must directly advance the state's interest. And the number 4 part is it's no more restrictive than necessary. And is it intermediate scrutiny? Is it a little tougher than an intermediate scrutiny? It's all over. A lot of commentators have said one way or the other, and we're not going to debate that. Certainly not on a late Friday afternoon to deal with that. But suffice it to say, it is a restriction. But it's a restriction that is open enough to be subject to interpretation. And that's where the Supreme Court became busy. Now, all this happened after the tobacco broadcast ban. So let's move the constitutional side, and move into the broadcast side. Broadcasters traditionally were subject to less First Amendment protection than print media. And to this very day, if you ever talk to an old-line broadcast lawyer, they hate it. They hate it. They've said it, that this is a ripoff from the 1934 Communications Act. Having said that, the rationale is that radio and television stations are licensed. There are only so many places to license them, so much spectrum space. In the Boston market, in the New York market, basically in the old analog era, only so many slots for radio stations, only so many slots for TV stations. Because of that, you can have all the newspapers in the world. Well, of course, in reality, you can't, but you get the idea. All the websites in the world, which you certainly could have it, but you're stuck. So the law said, in some respects, there can be regulations for broadcasters that you cannot have in the area of every other kind of medium. And some of them are content regulations. The idea behind the ban with tobacco had to do with the idea that the FCC came up with a ruling in the mid-60s that said, for every tobacco ad, every 5 tobacco ads, a station had to have 1 counter ad, 1 anti-tobacco ad, under something called the Fairness Doctrine. And the broadcasters weren't thrilled with it. The tobacco industry really wasn't thrilled with it because they didn't want all these ads saying their product is bad. They think of the Mad Men era. Anybody watch Mad Men? That first season, it talked about how to market these cigarettes that are safe, all this stuff. They didn't want this. So actually, while the industry didn't propose the ban, it didn't block the ban in Congress. And so there was tacit approval by the industry, by the tobacco industry,
to ban tobacco ads, because the logic was you had billboards, you had print, you have other areas, and we don't want to have all these counter ads. That was the world of I think it was 1970, was passed and President Nixon signed it, and these ads went off the air in 1971. There was a challenge to that by broadcasters. Broadcasters didn't want it. And the court, at that time, they used to have federal district courts with 3 judges. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was like a quirky thing. It was a 3-judge panel, and it said, we don't think there's a First Amendment problem here. So the law's been upheld. I don't think that would happen today. So if a federal ban on gambling advertising in radio and television was enacted, it would likely be challenged, and under Central Hudson, I would question whether it would pass constitutional muster. The reason I say that is because starting in the 1990s, there was a series of Supreme Court cases that seemed to elevate the commercial speech right. And they were laws regarding a ban on a proof count in Rhode Island. You know, you couldn't have the proof level in the ads for beer, and it was thrown out. They said, you know what, it's overbroad, it doesn't really fulfill the state's interest. There were bans on broadcasting ads for lotteries, thrown out by the court as basically vague, too vague and overbroad. There were restrictions on billboards for tobacco, which was obviously not broadcasting, it was print. And in 2001, the Supreme Court felt that that was overbroad under Central Hudson. But essentially, I don't think that a broadcast ban of such ads would work today for those reasons. The second reason is that the FCC has also been more sensitive to First Amendment issues, and the so-called fairness doctrine's been eliminated because there really is not the kind of scarce broadcast resources there were in 1969. Basically, look at all you have. You know what? Just as an example of how unscarce it is, because our son lives in Manchester, we live in New York City, we listen to WMUR all the time. We have it on the website. So you hear, and my wife said, oh my God, there's been a traffic accident near where my son worked, you know, and we get the alerts on top of it. So we're listening to WMUR as often as we are into WABC TV in New York. You know, it's a different world. And I'm not so sure that even on that ground, on a broadcast scarcity rationale, this is going to work. So what I think should be done, because I do think that advertising should be more restricted, although I think people probably would disagree with me, are a couple of ideas to consider on a national level. And one is channeling. It's basically the use of what's called safe harbors. And that's what's done with broadcast indecency. I won't get into broadcast indecency. It's a certain type of conduct that's protected speech, but it's, you know, shock jock stuff, 7 dirty word stuff. And the way it generally works is, and it could be used for advertising too, is after a certain hour of the day, you can allow, say, sports betting advertising, when children are not in the audience as much, after 10 p.m., after 11 p.m. And I would think that a regulation by the FCC or a congressional statute would be upheld as constitutional, because this rationale has been around for about 20 years for broadcast indecency, and indeed it's been upheld. So I suspect that's one way to do it. Another way that possibly could expand it is to expand this into cable and streaming, and that's where it would be difficult. If you're streaming a broadcast station, radio or TV, no problem. You just can use the same regulation. But if it's an outside cable service, it's an outside stream, that would also result in constitutional challenge, and it could be tougher to uphold. I will find ways to do that, you know, in the upcoming article, and then discuss arguments for that, to say that it would be more of a content-neutral regulation that could be upheld under more traditional First Amendment standards. But I'd be the first to admit that it would be a tougher road to hoe constitutionally. So I do think, you know, it would be an important issue. I will also add a couple of points, is that internationally, there are stronger regulations on advertising, either through voluntary compliance by the betting industry in a given country, or by legislation, because many countries do not have the same kind of First Amendment protection level and certainly not for commercial speech as we do in the States. So I think it is likely, I'll just make it a point that Belgium, I think, just banned or severely restricted betting. Italy did. Britain has a more voluntary arrangement, but other countries have been concerned about the level of advertising. And also with rising concern of at least anecdotal evidence of increased problem betting in certain jurisdictions. It's hard to say definitively, and I'm not a social scientist to look at the statistics to say definitively that there's a direct correlation, but we're seeing more calls around the country with the ease of these abilities to bet, and possibly due to the advertisement. One of the speakers in the last panel, in the excellent panel, I'd say, very informative panel, said he lives in Arizona and he's been, deluged with ads. That's what it's been like in New York as well. So there's been a lot of advertising, and coupled that with the ease of betting, concerns have been made, and I think that these concerns have to be addressed in some way. So that, in a sense, is where I'm coming from. You may agree, you may not agree. I look forward when I complete the article and it'll be out, then one could read and comment more. But that's sort of an overview, 10,000-foot overview of an issue that has really not been adequately addressed constitutionally. Professor McCann.
Conrad, really, it's a fascinating article. How do you respond to the argument that there are all sorts of vices that are advertised? There's crypto, there's day trading, there's alcohol, there are all these ease of buying stock, ease of buying property, timeshares. The list of things that are speculative is long. Why pick on sports betting when we have a long history of other sorts of advertisements, some of which are not regulated?
And some are, though. Securities advertising is regulated. If you take crypto like a security, and it's coming more like that to the fact, they are regulated.
As of now, it's not.
It will be very soon. But you're right, as of now, it's probably not, but because it's not a security. But I suspect that will come soon. And the Wild West era, so to speak, may ease. Alcohol ads could be restricted in some ways in certain states too, albeit it would be difficult, but I think it's the targeting issue, those under 18. And that's really the easiest way to go, I think, constitutionally. But it's a very fair point. Timeshares, I think actually on that issue, because I do teach timeshares in my class, because I'm fascinated with that industry, that some states do at least have certain prefatory language that have to be in the ads, like you have 10 days to back out of that. There's certain consumer regulations that could apply, but I'm not an authority on timeshares. I just have the experience of being hustled for a timeshare.
Not either, but I've heard of horrible experiences with them. So
yes, I do too, and I think there should be more there too, in terms of consumer issue. And then you get to the whole false and misleading aspect to it, where you can have more regulation. But it's a very fair point. Yes, I'm going into an area that, truth be told, that I felt, I was in favor of legalized sports betting. I was stunned personally by the amount of betting that I've seen in New York. Nobody thought it would be that high, and nobody thought that 9 companies would pay the incredibly expensive licensing fees to do business in New York. And with a 50+% tax hit on their income, and a 13% hit, I think, on individual betting, but 51% of their profits go to taxes in New York. I said, this is crazy. Everybody, the Wall Street Journal is yapping that New York is overtaxed and whatever. And you know what? It's been very successful. I mean, I'm stunned. Cannabis has not been as successful in New York thus far, but sports betting has. And it's been astounding that how much of it, and it's a little bit scary to that extent. So that's what started giving me pause. And it was not enough coverage about the negative side, I think, certainly in the sports media, because there's so many interests and so many stakeholders. And there is the potential for money, and there's a potential for something else. Could sports betting lead to legalized casino betting in a state through mobile to other venues? And that could be a little scary. One thinks about that. And so that's really where I take it, but I think Professor McCann's point is a very good point. Are we being a nanny? Is it sort of over-regulating something that's legal? And that's fair. I totally get that.
So problem gaming seems to be the why. You're advocating for some more restrictions on sports betting advertising. Are there any other interests you see that could rise to the level of a substantial state interest and allow for regulation?
On protecting children, if indeed that's a problem. I mean, I'll be fair to the industry, and obviously they take action, and it's not a Wild West that kids can just go and bet that easily, but, I'll bet there's a will, there's a way, and a parent that, gives an account number and a kid can get it, it's probably possible. But I think it would really be the potential for the problem gambling, and then trying to keep it away from those under 21. It's not even children, it's usually under 21, because one's a legal adult at 18, and still most states that I know of have a 21-year-old minimum to bet.
Professor Conrad, this is a great paper, and I can't wait to read it in its final form. Something that Jackson said, reminded me of something, which is that my son and I are huge New York Islanders fans. We love to watch the Isles games through ESPN.
Bad call that night. Wasn't that a bad call?
Terrible
bad call. And I'm a Rangers fan.
Terrible.
I admit, that was a terrible call.
Agreed.
Yeah.
He's referencing an awful non-call at the start of
bad.
overtime.
Yeah,
But,
cost them the game.
it really did. The broadcast, perhaps not ESPN, but the local broadcast partners oftentimes provide viewers with live odds.
Yeah.
Presumably that's being done pursuant to some sort of advertising agreement. As you said, New York has 9 different operators. The Islanders broadcast has presumably partnered with FanDuel, which is one of those operators. And my son, this is going to sound like it's made up, but my son has asked me on various occasions, what does plus 400 mean? And he's 7 years old. So I wonder whether your paper might also take into account some things that we don't traditionally think of as advertising, but yet in effect are advertising.
It deals with what's the definition of commercial speech,
Right.
which is it's not an easy definition to really get your hands on it. Like, is it commercial? Is it implicitly commercial? Is it getting people sort of hooked in? The tobacco companies used to have cartoon characters as part of their advertising, and they were no fools, because the fact of the matter is, for that industry, they needed new smokers because they understood many older smokers died for whatever reason. I mean, that's how cynical it could be. So there were ways to try to attract people. So, I'm not privy to that. It's more sociology, and of course I don't have legal data, but it's an interesting point that you make up, and a point that I, will think about. I mean, this paper could be a book. If I talked about what's false and deceptive, and I'm really going to stick to the constitutional issues here. And it's already, the word amount's piling up, which you don't want the law review articles to be too long. So I understand it's more what I'm going to cut out, but that's a very good point. Any other questions? Okay, I just wanted to,
Ryan Buchanan.
Hey, I was wondering what the implications are for states that don't have legalized sport betting. So they're presumably putting these advertisements on their national TV broadcasts. Maybe is it encouraging potential residents of the state to access online platforms that are offshore or not allowed by the state?
That's tough. The states really geo-block that. Maybe they're trying to do, there are exceptions from the broadcast laws to advertise lotteries and gambling that go into other state markets. So they're not doing anything illegal. But as far as offshore betting, that's been really stopped. And it's stopped by a law called UWICA that was passed in 2006. That was really not so much for sports betting or daily fantasy, but for like traditional betting. But the way it works, and the way it would make it difficult to bet here, is you go after the payment processors, i.e. credit card companies. So if you wanted to try to do that, no respectable credit card company will be part of that, because they're going to be in trouble. So you don't use your American Express card abroad. You're going to be like some kind of systems they have which are really not always trustworthy. And that ended a lot of that online poker stuff. because that's what was happening, and the law was really addressed to that. But as far as big gambling is concerned, I mean, that they understand that the companies, that it's state by state. And it's very effective. I walk on the George Washington Bridge to New York and New Jersey. It's a certain point when I will be officially in New Jersey that I can access the betting. I mean, that's how it is. My school is maybe 8 miles from the New Jersey border, and you can't bet. You just cannot bet in New Jersey. It's New York. So that technology is pretty secure. I'm sure somebody can figure out a way, but it's quite difficult to break, from what I understand. It's a good question.
I'm just curious, so speaking of whether something happens on a state-by-state level or federal level, are you arguing in this piece for federal reform, or could it be more piecemeal?
It will have to be federal if it's going to deal with broadcasting. Because the FCC is the Federal Communications Act is a federal statute, the FCC is a federal agency, it's interstate commerce, so it will be generally federal. There are a few broadcasting issues that are intrastate. If you have a radio station in like Texas, that the broadcast area is only within Texas, but it's still under the communications laws because of network issues and other issues that they're still doing enough business, at least until we have a change from maybe the Supreme Court, I don't know, but at least from as of, when I studied it, yeah, it would be under federal. When you're dealing with that kind of media, generally speaking, it'd be probably preempted. State law, a lot of it would be. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay, we have a few minutes left. Can I just make one plug? Okay, I just want to make a plug of something that we're doing and maybe of interest to you at my university. I teach at a business school full-time, although I adjunct at a law school. And we started a new center called the Gabelli Sports Business Initiative. And the goal of it is to examine issues in sports that are not normally examined and interview people that are not normally, that get the kind of publicity they do. And so far, for example, one of our interviewees was a tennis player from UMass that lost her championship because of the NCAA. And I interviewed her not only because of that, but what it's like to be a professional tennis player on the 200 level. And how you think like how she was almost kidnapped in Egypt, how she lost her tennis rackets in Barcelona. The kind of world that we don't always see. And another area I think, which is an area that would be of great interest that we followed at the center, we plan to expand on, is coaching abuse, emotionally, physically, sexually. If anything I could recommend in terms of a book to read is Kara Goucher's book, The Longest Race, The Long Race. It's just out. It's a tremendous book where she basically accuses the most powerful track coach in the United States of doping and sexual abuse. It came out, it's number 7 on the bestseller list. I interviewed her a few months ago before the book came out, and it's an incredible, sad but inspiring story of how difficult it is. The thing and there are other women too that have been affected by the system. And I had a student, by the way, just one last story and let you go, that was a former NFL player. It was at St. John's Law. And I showed a video, which by the way, another one on that subject, which is not about gambling, called I Was the Fastest Girl in America Until I Went to Nike. Just Google it, you'll see it, and it's pretty shocking. When this student saw it, he said, didn't she have an agent? What about the union? I said, bro, agents in running, women's running? Yeah, there may be 1 or 2. Union? No, they're independent contractors. They're dependent on their sponsors. It's a different world. And that's the kind of thing I want to show. We want to show that it's different. We plan a symposium on human rights in sports next year. We are planning, a book award. We want to expand it. If any students are interested in more, sort of email me, Conrad@fordham.edu. But I think it's going to be something interesting on the side of the business and what are some of the real interesting issues. And gambling is one of them. And also I plan to do a podcast on, somebody from gambling addiction and talk about that. Yeah, so this is food for thought. But I know it's late. I know you want to eat. It's Friday. So I just want to thank you very much.
concludes our symposium. Before we close everything up, I just want to thank a group of individuals. First, I want to thank my team this year. If y'all could stand up and we can all clap for you. Especially Caroline, took some pictures of the event today, and thank you very much. That was really nice of you. I want to thank Professor McCann, our faculty advisor, for the Q&A and also just the guidance throughout this process and finding speakers. That was very beneficial. Thank you. Thank Professor Dube for moderating one of the events today. That was very nice. The speakers today, Professor Conrad, Derrick Maultsby back in Pittsburgh, Charles McIntyre, and then Samson Williams and Andrew Tobbs. Really awesome stuff, very insightful. I really enjoyed it. I hope you all did too. I want to thank my family back in Pittsburgh. They'll eventually see this, but they're not here. But they said to send them the recording, so very nice of them. My girlfriend Rachel back in Columbus, Ohio, who had to hear about sports law review all the time. Dean Cooper sent out a bunch of announcements about sports law review and our publication deadlines and things of that sort. So the administration in general has been very supportive of us. It's always good to know that they have our backs with everything and they promote our events and things of that sort. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we're all eager to eat Buffalo Wild Wings and drink some soda. So let's wrap this up and thank you all for attending.
Can we have a break?